a bad mood, gotta keep it tight. Hold my baby squid, keep him out of sight. Talking about my life, government stay away. If you drive, I'ma do it my own way. Squid in the ocean, swimming all alone. Ain't nobody telling me where to go. Living free, gotta stay true to myself. No need for interference from anyone else. Squid pro quo, that's the way to be. Living on my terms, setting myself free. I'ma tell my baby, protecting with my no government intrusion. I control my life.
Hey everybody, it's Squid. Welcome back to the channel. How is everybody doing tonight? This is kind of an impromptu stream. I didn't really know if I was going to stream today. I wasn't feeling it earlier, and I got some free time. Cooked dinner, didn't feel like eating after I cooked, and was like, let's get into this. We are going to do we are still on day one of the hearings that started yesterday in the NTSB report. In the NTSB hearings that involve Flight 5342, for those of you who were living under a rock or just need a slight refresher. Flight 5342 was flying from U.S. nationals for figure skating into DC. A lot of figure skaters, including children, were on board, and it collided with a Blackhawk helicopter on its final descent into Washington National Airport. And now we want to know why. We started yesterday, and Spawn Trooper joined me. Hold on. Let me finish that kind of caught me off guard, Hung Hero. Hold on. Let me finish my little spiel that I had planned in my head, and you kind of threw me off in a good way, but you kind of threw me off. I am going to, Hung Hero, thank you for the 50 Squid Pro Quo memberships. And let me open up my YouTube studio in the control room. I don't know if I can read 50 names, but there was a lot of people, and it's still going. Everybody from Jamie Snyder, Deborah Thompson, PB and M Bear, Steve R, like just everybody. Georgia Ann, Angie, just a lot of people. Thank you, Hung Hero, for always trying to turn the chat green, and also ensuring that I don't work for free. Because, I love y'all, but I'm trying not to do this 100% for free. So I appreciate you supporting my channel from the very beginning. Yes. And a little dog Chaz, Hung Hero, thanks for the membership. And apparently, Hung Hero, when I try to type your name into a YouTube comment, when someone said thank you for your their membership, and I tried to give you credit, YouTube does not allow me to post that comment. It censors it on my own channel. Just so you know, your name is censored. And hey, Christine. Hi, Janet. Hi, Dad. How are you tonight? Christine, Dan, how are you? Yeah, I thought it was hilarious too. So we are going to get straight back into the day one, part two, my part two of the NTSB hearings from yesterday. Yesterday we started talking about what the theme was going to be for this, what they were looking for, all the parts that were going to happen on all 3 days. They kind of got through some housekeeping stuff, get through a breakdown of what exactly happened. And now they are interviewing and asking questions of their first panel of witnesses. Yes, ideally aircraft do not collide with each other, which is pretty interesting because, Duncan, I know it's funny that you mentioned that because I got a message from somebody that I served with a couple of weeks, like about a week ago, maybe 2. And he was like, we had an accident at S3B Viking. We had some issues with our non-skid on our deployment. Be it was trash and it didn't work. And we had an S3B basically go through the prop while the prop was turning. And the prop went through the side of the aircraft and destroyed a lot of stuff. And I'm trying to help him find somebody who was on deck during that accident because he is retiring and needs a letter of, like a buddy letter for the VA in order to get some benefits that he needs because of his PTSD from that incident. So, hi, Kathy, how are you? So ideally aircraft are not supposed to collide. And in this case, the aircraft, the CRJ being bigger. And for those of you, it was a CRJ 700, but this is a CRJ 200. For those of you who need a little model, this is a CRJ 200, be it its tail is broken because I have a toddler and, well, toddlers do what toddlers do. And it was on final approach. And it not only being on final approach, but being bigger and being less agile has the right of way. So that being said, what I figured out yesterday is that I believe, my personal opinion, based on what I've heard and what I've read so far, is that the helicopter was in the wrong. And the helicopter was the cause of all this. Why? It has yet to be determined. And that's what we are trying to figure out. So that would be Ong Hero. Production quality has really improved around here. That would be Mama Squid with her props. It ideally wasn't supposed to be broken, but And hey, Timothy, how are you? So we are going to get into this. I'm going to share my screen. And ideally, we will get through as much of this as possible tonight. We are watching on 1.25 speed, and we are skipping over all the side notes, useless banter, things that do not matter because we are here for the nuts and the bolts. Let me put myself here so that I cover up the hill. There we go. And we are going to get started. Also, this is the docket for all of the exhibits that they are using for these hearings. This being said, there are 205 docket items. Some are just the order of the hearing and basic syllabus type things. And other things are thousands and thousands and thousands of pages, like transcripts, helicopter operations interview transcripts, which I'm hoping to get a few people who are interested in this topic to help me read that. And some of these Spawn and I will be going through on videos pre-recorded, some on his channel, some on mine. But we are going to try to go through what we feel are important parts of this. We will not be going through everything because we will have content for a year. And we are not going to be reading things word for word. But like DCA, ATCT facility logs and records, 1,384 pages. So, yeah. Oh, it's swamp butt weather everywhere. I went to the gym today at noon. Oy vey. Now I understand why I've been going at 7 a.m. because going at noon today, and whoever decided that CrossFit style gyms would not have air conditioning in Southeast Georgia it's so silly. But we are going to get into it. Thank you all for joining me. I will be stopping periodically to give you all my input because that's just what I do. And also, this is a commentary channel. And here we go. And hi, Tammy. Only 72 in Northern Illinois. Yeah, you lucky you. But guess what? When you're shoveling snow and freezing your tail off. And when you're living where it hurts to breathe, it'll be 72 here. So, you got to take the good with the bad, I guess. I don't have to shovel snow. I haven't shoveled snow in 5 years, and I'm okay with that.
An indicated altitude on the barometric altimeter.
Thank you for joining us today.
Sorry, I didn't realize it was going to reset. This is your last winter in the Midwest, Tennessee, 2026. Good. We are probably going to back it up just a little bit and redo and re-listen to some of the things that we did just to get a heads up. But we will start here.
The resulting error of that placement.
And is there a design target for the amount of difference between indicated altitude and the actual altitude for the helicopter when designing a system?
Can you clarify, please?
So for the difference between what's indicated in the cockpit instrument to where the helicopter is actually at for altitude, is there a target during the design phase that you try to achieve for the placement of the ports for certain airspeeds?
For the UH-60, it would be based on any government requirements.
And what about for commercial helicopters that Sikorsky is designed?
Again, it depends on the categories being certified. FAR 291325, provides guidance for static position error, as well as it provides wording that you must use a certified altimeter.
Okay. And with the complex flow environments that we've identified that are present with helicopters in designing these systems, can you please describe some of the mitigation strategies that may be used to account for these aerodynamic effects that you see in the indicated altitude?
For the Blackhawk, at the time it was designed and with the government requirements that were provided, really probe geometry, placement, its installation angles is the primary tool. The UH-60 government requirements specified a specific altimeter to utilize. So that would not make the altimeter indication system an option to address any corrections. Present day, of course, with advanced equipment, air data computers give you more of an option. But again, 1970, late 70s, that was not available, and the government requirements specifically called out the altimeter to be used, and it was provided as a government furnished material property.
Yeah, and Dad, transcripts released about an hour ago saying the pilots had difficulty hearing air traffic control. Yeah, and I'm pretty sure that those transcripts are right here. I just don't have, what I'm going to do is I'm going to have, I'm going to try to go over some of this by osmosis, mostly meaning on days when I can't do a whole lot, instead of listening to YouTube or listening to an audiobook, I'm going to listen to Speechify, and I'm going to have Speechify read some of this stuff to me and see if I can, let some of this sink in, because there's a lot. There is a lot. And day 2 of the hearings is ongoing. Obviously, I can't stream 12 hours a day. So we aren't doing it live. We're going to be doing it at least every Wednesday with Spawn, and then periodically other days when I get the chance. Mr. Squid has been off all week, so I've been able to do some things like self-care, like go to the gym by myself kind of stuff. So I've been able to do some different things, but also I haven't wanted to stream as much because I've wanted to spend some time with the 3 of us together. So my next week will be back to relatively normal. And Dad, tomorrow I want to talk to you about something because I have an idea for you. I have an idea. Hi, beautiful. Boop. So, and I appreciate that. So we are behind. Obviously, they're on day 2 live, and we're still on day 1. And this is very technical as well. I understand not everybody is an aerospace engineer. Not everybody has a background in aviation. I will explain things that I feel comfortable explaining. However, I'm also not your professor. I am not an aviation expert, even though I have a background in aviation. I live with one. He will tell you he's not an expert, but I believe that he is full of crap when he tells you he is not an expert. So we will be discussing this as we go. I'm not, and I also don't need to dumb it down because this is a very technical panel, but nobody's stupid. So nobody in the chat is stupid. Yes, these are things that you aren't familiar with, but that doesn't mean you're stupid. That just means you're not an aviation expert. Shocker, like millions of other people. So basically, he's discussing the placement of the pitot tubes, which assists in one of the three types of ways that they gather altitude data. Have Red Neckify read it to you. That there aeroplane be getting awful close.
And Mr. Bradham, how will the Army evaluate mitigation strategies developed by a manufacturer?
Yeah, so typically in flight test, but if I could just back up for 1 second and just to clarify, so for a pitot-static system, we talk about instrument error, which is the actual calibration error in the physical altimeter itself, and that's what you're checking when you check on the ground without the rotors turning. And then you have what we're calling what's called position error or installation error, which is the error caused by aerodynamic effects around the aircraft. And those are two independent errors with different standards. And I'd say the standards that the Army used and the standards that the FAA uses for civil aircraft are very similar. And these issues are not unique to military aircraft. But your question is how would we evaluate that? And you do an airspeed calibration in flight test, and that airspeed calibration determines, for a given flight condition, determines the position error of the pitot-static system. And then we can mathematically convert that into altimeter error, and we can assess that against a standard. So for the Blackhawk, the position error, that standard was a mil spec called mil-I 6115, which has a very similar, slightly more stringent standard than Part 29.
And if a helicopter did not meet that military standard, would there be a required redesign, or would there be a correction factor that gets applied that pilots have to utilize? This question is to Mr. Bradham.
Yes, I think that would depend very much on the specific circumstances. There were, looking back through the historical documents, there were cases where there were small out of spec issues. 1 knot over a standard in one place, and the decision is made, by the government and the contractor that there's no further action required there. They can provide a correction to the operator when that's necessary, but again, I think it would depend on the particular flight condition and the particular size of and the effect of the noncompliance.
Mr. Cooper, for the UH-60L helicopter, the pitot-static probes are placed above the cockpit, which is closer in proximity to the main rotor. What are the technical considerations that would lead for those pitot-static probes to be placed closer to the main rotor?
In line with what I stated before, it's a balance of the total set of requirements. So again, for a military utility helicopter operating in the landing conditions, it does. Placement of the probes lower, as I said, could expose it to ingress of material, danger to maintainers, damage during ground operations. So that would tend to give guidance, provide an alternative by putting it above the cockpit, as was done on other military models, Sikorsky and others produced at that time.
And Mr. Gant, can you describe how the FAA approaches certification of static systems and barometric altimeters on civil helicopters?
Yeah, so as mentioned previously, for altimeters in civil transport category helicopters, that is regulated by Federal Aviation Regulation 29.1325 for altimeters. And the expectation is that the applicant for certification would comply with all the requirements within that paragraph, including the position error requirements that are in there. There are allowable tolerances.
And from the FAA's perspective, would there be a concern with the placement of the pitot-static probes as seen on the Blackhawk?
I don't have any opinion on that. I think there's different ways to design, just as we've shown in your presentation. Maybe typical today is more on static port locations on fuselage, but there have been many instances where static ports are also co-located with the pitot system. So again, it comes down with compliance to the requirements and not necessarily the aspects of whether that's incorporated one way or the other.
And Mr. Cooper, aside from customer requirements, what would be other technical considerations to select a pitot-static probe versus a pitot probe with a separate static port that's on the fuselage?
Again,
And this is where it goes over my head because that was AE territory. I was AAT. I adjusted the pitot-static tubes on my side of the plane when required by the pilots. Because if they're in the wrong position, you'll get a notification from the plane captain that you need to adjust them. Sometimes the AEs will do it, and sometimes whoever's just damn closest to the thing will do it. And a lot of the times that was me. So that's my only. Altimeters were not my area of expertise. I have a basic understanding of how they work just based on the electronics. However, not my area of expertise. So I am learning with this too. And skill fade, it has been 20 years since I worked on planes. So here. Yeah, listening to Sweet Baby Squid in the background always helps when things get heavy. Yeah, her and her dad are having daddy-daughter time because she woke up from her nap and she wanted nothing to do with me. I was going to do this later tonight, but then I cooked dinner and I had no desire to actually eat dinner. So I was like, let me go work. So I am learning and rehashing some of the things that I learned too. And I have not heard in a long time. A lot of these terms I'm very familiar with. I just haven't heard them in a long time. But we need to figure out why things happened, what can be improved, and how do we never let this happen again.
sorry to come back to it, but it is the total set of requirements. In that picture you showed for the fuselage placement, that was a Naval Hawk aircraft. Ace, of course, produced Naval Hawk aircraft, but it does not have a requirement for...
And that would be a Seahawk. So I appreciate, and we pointed this out yesterday, that we're doing a little overlapping, but I appreciate the fact that he pointed out that this is a Seahawk. In the graphic that they showed in their little presentation, there are differences. It's the same airframe, but because there are different operational requirements, there are different builds. So the pitot-static system on a Seahawk is inherently different based on saltwater, spacing, the door, you're not going to have a door gunner. You're going to have a search and rescue swimmer. So the design is a little different. So the placement's got to be a little different. It's same airframe, different build.
Or a sliding cabin, also known as the gunner's window. So that area would be covered when the gunner's window is in the open position as it can be in flight. So that would take that location, that example you shown. It comes down to available real estate, the dynamic conditions in that area. In your discussions with me earlier, you mentioned tail ports, static ports, but again, there's equipment on the Blackhawk that would impact that operation. It's considering all the requirements that the helicopter must meet, what's fitted to achieve that, and what available area on the fuselage can be utilized. And then with that, understanding the dynamic conditions that may be present on that fuselage, if it's static, if it's suitable for a static port.
Mr. Bradham, aside from the Static 1 and Static 2 systems on the Blackhawk, are there alternate static sources?
No, not on the Blackhawk. The S1 and S2 are redundant, and each static system, as you mentioned in your presentation, pulls from each side's pitot tube. So S1's fed from both right and left, and S2's fed from both right and left.
Okay. Can you please, Mr. Cooper, this question's for you. Can you please describe the types of errors that can add up to ultimately affect the indicated altitude on the barometric altimeter?
As was stated by the other gentleman, there's two prime areas. One of them has several contributions, but there's the static source error, and then there is the instrument error. The instrument error for this altimeter has several factors that builds up to its estimated error. Instrument error, consider a tolerance. There's a plus and minus. So when you come up with that error, there could be in the plus direction or the minus. Static source error, which is identified, the resulting is identified during flight test. It's usually a number as a function of airspeed, and it is not constant, but I would not call it tolerance. There's not a plus or minus. There is a number that's identified during flight test as a function of airspeed.
And Mr. Bradham, from the airworthiness perspective, how are the stack up of these errors managed by the Army?
So for the from an airworthiness perspective, right, we have standards for each of the individual errors as they occur. So instrument error, so for the altimeter itself was handled for the Blackhawk by mil spec. It was a mil spec. It was 81852 and 81851, and that lays out a number of individual tests under specific conditions for a number of specific errors. So for example, inside the altimeter, there's two separate calibration tests, one for the Colesman window gearing and one for the expanding aneroid capsules. And there's different standards for those, and those are independent errors. So we don't have a standard to roll all that together. We do it by each individual error that occurs to make sure it meets tolerance. And I believe that's how it's done, not just in the Army. But then you have position error, and as I said, that's a mil spec 6115 alpha, which has a standard for that. So and then yeah, so that's how we manage it. Each one of the errors has its own tolerance defined, and there's corresponding civil standards. The FAA has a TSO, a technical standard order, that defines altimeter instrument error, and FAR Part 29 talks about altimeter position error, same as the mil specs used to.
Hey, Killdozer.
Mr. Cooper, can you tell me about other designs for barometric altimeters? In this case, the accident helicopter's barometric altimeters uses aneroid wafers or capsules, as Mr. Bradham mentioned. Can you tell me more about other designs that ultimately allow for higher precision and accuracy for barometric altitude, for pressure altitude?
So first, the time period, that was a common design. And as I said, the government requirements, that altimeter was specified to be used and was provided by the government. As time has gone on, and certainly current day, air data computers became available, which provided they did not have the mechanical wafers, the mechanical indicating dial. They did not have the mechanical correction for the Colesman window. So those errors could come out. So the implementation of air data computer, which requires a different display medium, allows you to achieve a lower error at the instrument error analogy.
And this to me is just a lot of questions designed to get to the bottom of one simple thing. Was this altimeter causing their problems because they were never, ever under their 200-foot ceiling. There was a 300-foot ceiling that we went through yesterday. They were above that. It looked like they were going to drop down. She was dropping down, and every time she even got close to that 200-foot ceiling, she would instantly pop back up by like 40 or 50 feet, which doesn't seem like a lot. But had they been under that 200-foot ceiling, it would have been a close call. But in my opinion, based on the graphs, the data, what I heard, what I saw, the preliminary report that Spawn and I read back in early June, these two aircraft would not have collided. I wanted to say jets, but one of them's not a jet. These two aircraft would not have collided had she been under 200 feet. Think about that. So this part right here of getting to the bottom of, was it her mistake that she was over 200 feet? Was she reading the altimeter wrong? Were her goggle or her night vision goggles, which is what Spawn hyper focuses on sometimes. Part one of this is just figuring out, were these altimeters the problem and causing a problem as to why she was high? Because if that's the problem, okay, then it was her fault, but it was an instrumentation error and not a pilot error, and just not listening to her instructor, not paying attention, something else causing the problem. It's just, this is all about this whole line of questioning. We're 18 minutes into this line of questioning, all to figure out, were the altimeters the problem? Yes, and Vice Squad is the best squad. Guys, I feel like so much has changed. I mean, we all got to meet Connor, which is great. Vice baby is amazing. But like, so many things changed, and not all of them for the better after Vice's passed away. Lord knows I miss Vice's every day. But Vice Squad is the best squad. And I know that I can never, ever, ever have the same impact that Jeff did. But if I can, like, have a little bit of that positivity and keeping things positive on my channel and making sure that like it's not a drama zone and like trying to be the bright light in people's days, even when I am a little bitchy. Like then I feel like my job is done. Plus Vice's, like, man, like Vice Ice Baby doing Maritime Mondays is like amazing to me. It's my favorite thing in the world.
And Mr. Bradham, what are the factors that are considered in transitioning existing helicopters to newer technologies such that Mr. Cooper just talked about?
From an airworthiness perspective, we're just looking to see if it meets all the standard requirements. I would say that, the Army, DoD, we've moved away from the very prescriptive mil specs, and we use commercial standards more typically going forward.
And Mr. Gant, from the civil helicopter side, at what point do the design requirements warrant transition to newer technologies that we're talking about here with air data computers?
Well, we don't prescribe when a new technology has to be introduced unless it's one that we think would improve safety to the extent that we would go through the whole process of rulemaking to make that technology available, or a requirement, excuse me, in the federal regulations.
And Mr. Gant, with changing operational requirements in the national airspace, key into that decision of whether rulemaking is needed to require newer technologies?
I would say it could factor into that.
And this question is for both Mr. Cooper and Mr. Bradham. Aside from rotor wash considerations, what other challenges are there in designing an air data system that provides accurate indicated altitude to the pilots?
I go from my perspective, the main issue is low speed operation, right? And that's the influence of the rotor wake, which is what you talked about, right? It's why you see, when an aircraft picks up to a hover, why you see the altimeter decrease, right? It's the rotor wake coming down on the static system. And that's at low speeds, common to helicopters, that can be an issue. It's why the Blackhawk pressure instruments, really below 40 knots aren't used. So I think that's the primary issue, but the configuration of the aircraft can affect the static position error.
Yeah, for low speed, it is obviously the rotor wash, but at more forward speeds, that rotor wash is not impinging on the probe, so that is not a factor at the higher speeds. Certainly above 60 knots normally is where we don't see that effect. Again, depends on the install, but it is the configuration of the aircraft, what else is installed, either originally or as the model has been utilized, and certainly the customer has updated configuration of the aircraft. So installation of items can have an effect on the static position error.
Thank you. I'll hand it off to Ms. Mueller.
Good morning. Mrs. Lewis, when flying at low altitudes, do you normally reference the radio or the barometric altimeters?
In my experience, when flying at low altitude, I would be referencing the radar altimeter.
And
Okay, so yesterday we were trying to figure out exactly what she was, as far as we know what she is. She's a chief warrant officer. She's a warrant officer, like she's an Army, but we couldn't figure out why she was there. Okay, she's the pilot, or she's a pilot. She's just giving a pilot's view. That's what wasn't told to us yesterday, as far as these group of people when they were sworn in. But now that makes a little more sense. She didn't look like she wanted to be there yesterday. She looked like she was nervous. She was going to be the girl, which is me. And I say this in the most respectful way. I hate public speaking. I've always hated public speaking. Go figure, I started a YouTube channel and figure that one out. I don't know. What happens when you get older, shit gets weird. However, now we figured out why she's there. Because they were going around her. I'm like, are you ever going to ask her anything? Yeah. Phil Donahue. You mean the FAA Phil Donahue or the Sikorsky Phil Donahue? Because they both could pass.
when would you transition roughly between the two?
In my experience, certainly 200 feet and below, I would be referencing the radar altimeter. However, if I was flying on a published MSL route, I would be referencing barometric altitude.
Ms. Lewis, can you go over the procedure for setting up the barometric altimeter and checking it before flight?
Yes, as part of the cockpit equipment checks, the barometric altimeters are set on the ground before the aircraft is started. And the requirement for the Army is that they are within 70 feet of field elevation.
And where do you get the barometric setting from, usually?
From ATIS, the Automated Terminal Information System.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm still not convinced that flying, I'm still, even though they were doing a mission where it was planning on if they had to evacuate government officials from DC. That was the mission that they were training for. However, as a veteran, as a member of the military, as a former naval aviation maintainer, the thought of, and I was in Virginia, so different situation. However, not that far from DC. The thought process of, and I'm trying to think of how to put this eloquently. The thought of, I know it's a training mission and I know it has to be done, but the thought of putting civilian lives in danger for a military exercise, I can't get past. I know it's DC. I know it's very busy airspace. I know that there's only so many routes to take out of DC. However, I still can't get over a military aircraft passing through the landing lane of civilian aircraft. As military members, as military pilots, as maintainers, as any military, you put yourself in certain harm's way. You signed up for that. Whether you liked it or not, or you're willing to admit it or not, you signed a blank check to the government for your life. You became U.S. government property. Whether you like to admit it or not, that's what happened. But you inherently know that this is your job. There's a danger to it. If something happens to me, it's okay because this is what I signed up for. However, civilians did not sign up for that shit. These kids were on their way back from nationals, figure skating nationals, a high-level development camp. These were potential future Olympians. Like, these were high-level skaters. You have to be a very high level to be invited to this camp that they were at. They didn't ask for that. They didn't ask for to be put in the middle of a military exercise with night vision goggles in DC. I cannot get over the fact that the Army and DCA, which is the airport code, I just, like, my brain skips, like, starts to, be like a skipping CD for those of you who are of a certain age. I just struggle to find the words. I struggle to find the nice way to put that I think the Army fucked up. I think the pilot fucked up, but I think more than the pilot and an ATC and their communications being crappy, I think the Army allowing, and the airport grounds themselves, allowing military aircraft to pass through an active runway, I just cannot get past that. And this is where I'm stuck. So as much as, like, I joke about shit, like, these kids and even the civilian pilots did not ask to be put in this fucking situation. And, like, I can't. And I'm sorry if that frustrates some of you that I can't get over that. But, like, my brain keeps going back to the night vision goggles. Should they be doing that in airspace? Yeah, well, here's the thing about NVGs that I've talked to Spawn about, and I'm not an expert. I've never worn them in my life, never needed to. I worked on aviation. I worked on aircraft on an aircraft carrier. Like, not my, Spawn could tell you more about NVGs, but at the same time, you put Spawn on an aircraft carrier and he's going to be a lost puppy. You know, everybody has their area of expertise. I can't imagine that taking them off and putting them on, taking them off and putting them on is a good idea either, just based on lighting. Just my personal, just knowing what I know about vision and how it adapts to light and not. This is what at least one person needed to not have night vision goggles on the submarine. We always had designated trainer who did not have to be involved in the drill for safety reasons. Yeah, same thing on an aircraft carrier. When we were doing drills, we always had a couple of people who were there as safety. My brain like skips a beat. Like it makes me want to be like, what were you thinking? And I don't think that will ever be addressed. And that's the disappointment to me, is I don't think that question will ever be asked. Why did DCA and why did the FAA and why did the Army allow aircraft to cross paths with each other on a regular basis? And we'll get back into this. But there's my soapbox. And this is on 1.35 speed or 1.3. So if she's talking a little fast, we're doing it on purpose.
What reason might you flag your barometric altimeter as being inaccurate?
Aside from the initial check on the ground, in my experience, the only reason I would have to question my altimeter would be if ATC were to call me and question what altitude I was flying at, if I was supposed to be flying at an assigned altitude or on a route at a particular altitude.
Okay. So moving gears a little, Ms. Lewis, what other helicopters have you flown?
I have flown the Alpha, Lima, Mike, and Victor versions of the Blackhawk, and those are the only helicopters that I have flown.
Thank you. So on those other models, have you seen any differences between the Lima model and those helicopters for the barometric altimeter?
Can you clarify the question, please?
I know this is moving faster. We're at 1.35 speed, but she does blink a lot.
Okay, so when you're at hover in that flight regime, have you seen between like the Alpha to the Victor and the Limas different, like do they feel different? Like what is being displayed on the barometric altimeter?
In my experience, I'm not referencing the barometric altimeter to hover.
Mm-hmm.
I would be glancing inside at the radar altimeter while at a hover. I would not be paying much attention to the barometric altimeter to hover.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Bradham, could you please describe the standards related to the design of the static system for the Army helicopters?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's important, of course, to point out again that the standards are very similar between military and civil, particularly the ones used for the Blackhawk. And so we'll talk about all the different kinds of error, right? So the standards, you have a standard for the instrument itself, which was the mil-spec 81851 and 81852, which have the same tolerance. And that has a number of different tests inside it, a number of dynamic tests for things like hysteresis and friction. But I think the main ones to focus on here are the two calibration tests. You have a scale error test, which is where you test the calibration of the capsules themselves. Mm-hmm. And then you have a barometric scale setting test where you test the calibration of the Colesman window gearing itself. So you have standards for each one of those, and those standards vary by temperature and they vary by altitude. So for example, in the scale test, the standard at sea level standard temperature is plus or minus 30 feet. But at 500 feet, that's plus or minus 35 feet. It changes. At extreme temperature, that can go to as far as 60 feet. And then the barometric scale setting is generally plus or minus 25 feet, but it too changes. And that's very similar to the FAA TSO, which is based on a Society of Automotive Engineers standard. And then you have the position error standard. As we talked about, that's for aerodynamic effects on the system. And that's, in this case, that was from MIL-I 6115, which is plus or minus 25 feet per 100 knots of airspeed. And that's very similar to Part 29, which is 30 feet per 100 knots of airspeed. And then I'll just mention it here, just that if you compare radar altimeter to baro altimeter, you have to keep in mind that radar is measuring true altitude, like if you put a tape measure out the aircraft to the ground. Pressure altitude is measuring a pressure altitude based on a temperature assumption, and so you have to correct for non-standard temperature as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Lots of math, lots
So,
of
Mr.
over
Cooper,
my head
what amount
and
of
not
difference between the
smart.
barometric altimeter and the helicopter's actual height is expected for UH-60L?
Based in my review of the government requirements prime item development spec, I've not found a standard cited for static position error, not defined. Instrument error is identified by the mil specs that were cited, 81852 and 8851. The mil spec that was cited, 6115A, was identified in a report, but have not found it defined in the government requirements. So ultimately, the resulting error was identified by flight test.
So those identified by flight tests, and we've kind of already talked about this a little bit, but the error changes at different regimes and different flight regimes.
So yes, the flight test data is presented as altitude error as a function of airspeed. So it is not necessarily constant number. And as report in the report for the UH-60 Alpha, which the configuration is the same for the Lima, it is changing for the clean configuration. So I can't give you a singular number. For the configuration, it's called high drag. It's when the external storage support system, also called ESSS, and we often, at least in Sikorsky, call it ESSS, so there's a lot of acronyms used there in case I say it again. That also has a different static source error curve. That one is more consistent, though, and is a nominal above, I believe, 40 knots is a nominal 50 foot. I'll have to check on the speed, but it is, as you say before, as is the clean, higher in a hover, but in forward flight, it's a nominal 50 in that configuration.
Thank you.
And I understand that this is a lot of technical information and kind of, yeah, it's a lot to take in. And that's why I'm just kind of letting it play and not trying to dive into each thing he's saying. However, for those of you who didn't join us yesterday or see the very beginning of this hearing at all, the chairwoman basically had said one of the rules that they are to abide by is they are not to use acronyms. Everybody in there uses acronyms. Those acronyms can mean different things based on what, like he said, Sikorsky calls it one thing, the Army calls it another. So they are not to use acronyms. So if you see somebody like stutter and start to say something and then stop, they've most likely started to use an acronym and then caught themselves. It happens all the time. Like I say stuff and I'm like, no. I have to actually say the words because that's an acronym that nobody is going to freaking understand. Like yesterday I wrote AT2 out, and today I wrote aviation electronics tech because if you weren't in the military, especially if you weren't in the Navy, you don't know what the hell an AT2 is. So I wrote it out.
Thank you. Oh, and just for people who are listening, the ESSS or the picture of the accident helicopter, the wing tanks out the side. Right. So how does Sikorsky manage that difference in altitude? What is it that you produce for the operator and the crew?
So the flight manual is approved by the Army. Its content is that which is approved by the Army. In the report of the test I cited, in that document, it recommended that the curves for the altitude position error for the clean, as well as the high drag external storage support system be included in the flight manual, but it ultimately was not included in the approved version.
Thank you. So, Mr. Bradham, Mr. Cooper was just saying about how the flight manual discusses the differences for the clean configuration helicopter, but it didn't make it into the Army flight manual, the differences for the ESSS system.
I'm sorry, just clarification, both altitude errors
Both
are
of
not
altitude,
defined.
sorry.
Clarification.
Do we believe that crews should be informed of this difference?
So for the external store support system for ESSS, yeah, that level of position error between 80 knots and 100 knots of about 40 to 50 feet, that level of position error was identified, in the original qualification of the system. We verified that level of error exists through the L. We've looked for records of the discussion. At the time, there would have been an operator's manual content review board, and we've looked for a record of the discussion about altitude. We've not found a record of a discussion about whether, about a decision to include or exclude that information. I think it's important to put that information in context when you're thinking about what to provide to an aviator in.
Whoop.
Particular error has no influence.
Oh no. Oh no. I don't know why it's.
For 500 feet or
There we
more.
go.
So it would be.
That's them, not
I'd be
me.
speculating if I went to the reason of why. Put that in.
That is so them, not me. For once, it's not me.
Now that it's been identified, do you plan on including it?
I say we've been tasked by the program, that the Airworthiness Authority has been tasked by the Program Office for Utility Helicopters to do the analysis, which we've done, and to provide a recommendation back, which is being done right now, which will then go to the PM office for their consideration as to how to whether and how to incorporate it into the manual.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Bradham, do you have the time frame for when that will be completed?
No, I can't speak to the Program Office in terms of the timeline. We've been.
Steve, or Mr. Bradham, I can speak to that.
Thank
I'm the Division Chief of the Utility Helicopter Programs Office. I was the one who tasked Mr. Bradham's organization to take a look at this issue. So typically we have a 30-day turnaround on tasks to the organization. We're about week 2 of that. So that's about the time we found out about this issue. And so we should have something back this fall at the latest. And we'd be happy to keep you appraised of that status.
Thank you. And I also ask that you bring your mic closer to you. Thank you.
Will do.
All right, Ms. Lewis. During our
He's way
investigation,
too
we
happy
saw
to be
the
there.
80 to 130 foot differences between the barometric altimeters and then the radio and the geometric altitudes. Would you, as a pilot, consider this amount of difference impactful to your operation?
In my experience, a difference in 80 feet or so between the radar altitude and the barometric altitude would not be cause for alarm. Generally, I'm relying more heavily on one altitude instrument versus the other, depending on what I'm doing and what altitude I'm at. So I'm generally not looking at both and trying to figure out the difference between the two, depending on what I'm doing on that particular flight.
All right, this is for Mr. Cooper, Bradham, and Rosengren, just to start. But during the ground testing of the 12th Battalion helicopters, 2 of the helicopters, the barometric altimeters were within 20 feet of tolerance. But once we were in forward flight, 100 with 100 knots of forward speed, the barometric altimeters showed errors of 80 to 130 feet. What types of errors do you believe could contribute to this 80 to 130 foot discrepancy?
Yeah, I'll start with that one, please. So when you think about all the different errors that could contribute to that, one, you have to make sure the Colesman window is clearly set correctly, and that the Colesman window actually reflects the right barometric pressure. So the flight tests you're referring to are the ones on the 15th of May, that 1 unit flight. So backing up, it's important to point out that that's really an anecdotal event. It doesn't use the standard flight test methods that the military and the FAA would use in order to characterize a pedostatic system. So there's not an independent truth measurement of barometric pressure and some of the other things that we would use here. But so in terms of the errors, one is the Colesman window. Then you have the instrument error, which is what you saw on the ground. All 3 of those aircraft were registering altimeter low on the ground, but within spec, right, for the instrument error. Then you have the position error. So 2 of the aircraft were clean, and 1 of the aircraft was ESSS. So the clean aircraft at 100 knots, you're looking at about roughly 7 feet altimeter low in position error. For the ESSS aircraft, about 50 feet position altimeter low for position error. And then you also have to correct for non-standard temperature, because you're trying to compare radar altimeter to barometric altimeter. And so that wasn't a factor for the accident aircraft because the conditions were close to standard and you were low altitude. But on the 15th of May, those flights, you were flying at about 1,000 feet and about 9 degrees hotter than standard based on the aircraft OAT. That's about 36 feet altimeter low. So the combination of those factors, the instrument error, the position error, and a temperature correction, which all happen to be in the same direction, doesn't always happen that way, but in this particular case did, that if you carry that for the 3 aircraft, those errors ends up bringing you to relatively good agreement between rat out and bear out, if you compare them that way.
Thank you.
And I concur with all the statements that were made. Just one clarification, because I was involved in that ground evaluation. One of the aircraft, the right altimeter, did fall outside the Army maintenance manual check limit, so that was out of spec. And in fact, its vibrator was inoperative, so that right.
Phrasing. However, I think it's fantastic. You haven't pulled your hair out for days now. Well, I haven't covered the hails all week, so there's that. Because there's been really nothing new as far as documents that's happened. So I haven't covered that, which, although there's been a lot less people watching my channel, life gets a lot less frustrating that way. In the sense of the bull crap that is going on with that with people's filings and such. However, the reason that I haven't pulled out my hair with this is because I'm pretty convinced, based on the preliminary report and what I saw about the that with the altitude and yesterday, that there is not a lot that's going to convince me that it's not the pilot's fault. I am just wondering why it's the pilot's fault. Was it instrument error? Was it an ego problem? Was it communications between her and her co-pilot and her instructor? Was it communications between her and ATC, which leads to the whole what Spawn and I have been talking about and on this channel of the plan to redo the entire air traffic control system, and where the money has gone for the past 30 years to redo our air traffic control system. But I digress. So like it's one of those like, I have my thoughts, and I am not afraid to say that I think that it's pilot error. There is just wide range of what could be pilot error, because there's a lot of errors that a pilot can make. I've known a lot of really good pilots, and then I've met a lot of pilots where I'm like, how the hell did you get here? How the hell? When we have pilots come back and write, radio does not work in OFF position. No shit, mofo. If you know what OFF is, it's not a fucking acronym. It spells off. By definition, shit's not supposed to work when it's off. But pilots and their egos, you can't tell them that. You have to literally wrote cycled. Appears to be working just fine. Radio checks with tower. Works just fine. You can't tell them you're a fucking moron. Does not work in the OFF position. OFF spells off, you dumbass. You can't tell them that. But you look at them and you're like, huh? We literally had a pilot that was short, and he wanted the airframers to move the pedals in the aircraft and change the specs of the aircraft instead of just moving his seat forward. No, it's in pilot. Hey, AT1, how are you? Sorry I didn't say hi to you. Not the pilot, it means on full force. Yeah. So I believe, and that's one of the reasons that I'm not getting frustrated with this, too, because I'm relearning things that I learned back in 2005. However, it's one of those things of like, I just want to know the why, and the why this happened, and why. My big thing is, why did this happen? What caused her to be higher than normal or than she should have been? Was it her ego? Was it her instruments? Was it the NVGs causing problems? What can the Army do better next time? And why do you let a Blackhawk cross a active runway while using NVGs? Because that just seems like an accident just waiting to happen. My brother worked at Elgin, and he said he would have to say the same thing about the off button. Okay, I'm glad it's not just the Navy. No way that is arrogant. Short person redo the cockpit. Yeah, it's kind of like, so that's why when I got to working at the hospital, doctors and their egos, like I used to work on cardiac floors, and I worked on neuro floors, and I worked in rehab, and you dealt with doctors all the time. That's why my neurosurgeon, like instead of going into his office for my consult and being intimidated at the fact that he was a neurosurgeon, I wrote my entire pre-op like thing in medical terminology. I basically said, I know you don't have a good bedside manner, but you're here to do a job. How about you don't treat me like with an attitude like I'm dumb, and I won't treat you, and I won't be a bad patient. Let's put it that way. And doctors' egos can't bother me, because nobody's egos can ever top a military pilot. And to my pilots who are on my Facebook page, I love you guys who might see this, maybe not. You know who you are. I do love you guys. But you know that y'all have egos beyond the wildest imaginations of anybody else on planet Earth. Even the biggest narcissists I know could not have as big of an ego as a fighter pilot. Just saying. Tech radio works as on. If it does not work in the OFF position, it has a built backup switch in the on position. Ask an E1 to explain this report to you. We had a pilot complain that the relief tube was too short. Airframe sucked it off as a 799. Works fine on an enlisted. I would have said something like, bring a better magazine. just a thought. All right. Getting back to this, but that's why I'm not ripping out my hair, is because I have theories on what happened. I have theories on what happened and why it happened. I just want to, it's pilot error. It's just, well, what pilot error is the $1 million question. His was better than mine. Well, they all work. They're all good, and they all serve their purpose. So receptors for the oscillating flat frequencies have always been great for receiving nothing at all. The best part, the thing that I remember, and I should do a stream where I just tell sea stories because they're hilarious. We had 6 radios, 6 UHF VHF radios. So there was one radio that didn't work intermittently, and the air crew couldn't give us any reasoning besides didn't work intermittently. So I sat on top of the aircraft I was on night shift. So I got on top of the plane and I just did radio checks for 3 hours intermittently throughout the night. And that was my night. That was the easiest night. I just did radio checks. I would love to get like a couple of other vets, maybe like Flux and a couple other people, and just tell stories, because we all got them. And you don't have to be in the same branch to understand the mentality of the stories. So, but we'll get back to this because I digress with stupid math stories.
Right, altimeter data would be in question for that aircraft.
Thank you. Mr. Rosengren, do you have anything to add?
No, the only comment I have there is whenever Mr. Bradham and I kind of went through the data, pursuant to some of the questions I think we'll have later, I was properly educated and pleasantly surprised. We was able to get to doing the air stack ups within 1 foot of the differences, and so we'd be happy to provide that data to you in writing later.
We would definitely appreciate that. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Hey, Amos girl.
So continuing on that, and you were talking about how it is anecdotal, and we do recognize that 3 helicopters is quite a small data. It's a very small sample set, but it did line up with the existence of a possible wider discrepancy. And you have looked into that clearly. Is there additional testing planned between the Army and Sikorsky?
So from an airworthiness perspective, we've gone back through the data, and we have airspeed calibration data for the Lima. We understand the static position error. So we don't have any flight testing planned. I leave that to the program office if they have other thoughts relative to that.
And as I mentioned earlier, I was as initial receipt of the data from the flight test and anecdotal flight test you mentioned, I wanted to look into it, and I asked Mr. Bradham's organization to please let's get together and try to understand what's going on here to see if there is an issue. And again, after stepping through all of the various sources of error, and again, it's a very piece part manner. Everything was within specification, minus the discrepancy we passed and look into. And so I don't see any need from a safety or airworthiness perspective to do any changes for the Lima helicopter. From my perspective, I advise the colonel who advises the Army the safety of the aircraft. My perspective is this is a safe aircraft.
Yeah, and we can, if you'd like, we can talk to the difference between the recorded pressure altitude and in the recorder. Yeah, oh, cool. Thank you.
That guy on the end strikes me as he doesn't want to be there, or he's nervous because he is the
So this conversation makes me
awkward smile.
conclude that this feels like this is an inherent limitation of a barometric altimeter?
Yeah, based on all the information we've worked together and along with our Sikorsky friends, I believe this is the expected errors of in an altimeter system. So when we provide that data to an aircrew, there should be an expectation, as I believe they're trained to have that expectation, plus minus 100 feet or so.
Thank you very much. This is the end of my line of questioning, and Mr. Payne will begin next.
Get my microphone positioned here. Hello. I'm going to follow on with specifically pilot operational considerations, and we talked a bit more about stacking errors, and we touched upon setting the Colesman window correctly. I'm going to come back to that. So I'll start with Ms. Lewis, and I'll have some questions for Mr. Bradham also later, as he's an experienced Blackhawk pilot. That's my understanding. Ms. Lewis, earlier you described briefly setting the altimeter, or your operations around that area. As a pilot, can you walk us through in detail the process of setting the altimeter according to the Army's operational procedures?
Yes, as part of the cockpit equipment checks, the barometric altimeters are set generally based off of the local ATIS information, and then it's compared to the known field elevation. And as long as there's not more than a 70-foot error, then the altimeter is considered reliable for flight.
Sure. I want to get into a bit of a discussion about the known field elevation. So you cross-check, obviously. Once you've set the altimeter according to the ATIS, there's a 70-foot allowance. My next question goes into, how do you determine the field elevation for those who are unfamiliar in the audience? Where do you get that data from?
Field elevation is published on airport diagrams. It's published on approach place. It's published in a number of places for airports that we operate in and out of.
Sure, for operational airports. So continuing on with maybe where your unit was based, is it tribal knowledge or an official part of Army procedures to discuss if there's changes in elevation between where the measurement is taken, which for FAA airports typically at the highest point on the runway? If you're starting or performing that check, as you said, prior to rotors turning, are you do the Army's procedures account for a difference in the airport topography when you make that check and try to fall within the 70 feet?
The Army procedure is to check tower setting against the setting for field elevation, and then it's unreliable for flight if more than 70-foot error exists.
Sure. Okay.
I'm I know I haven't stopped this in a while, but I'm really glad that she has, in the Navy, we call it the NATOPS. It's the pilot's manual. I couldn't actually tell you what it stands for right now. But I'm really glad that she has it in front of her, because then there's no question. She's like, I don't know. If she doesn't know the answer, she can be like, I don't know, but I can tell you. Give me a second. I can look it up for you. I know where to find it. Which, with everything going on with these aircraft, these are very technical aircraft. It's a lot that goes into it. And sometimes you don't always have the answer right at your fingertip, in your brain. You know how to do it inherently, but you don't always have the words to describe how to do it or have the exact specifications right there. So you're old. No, I'm just kidding. So I'm glad that she has what I'm assuming is the Army's version of a NATOPS. I don't know what the Army calls it. Sorry for y'all, sorry to not know what it is. And my opinion of her is the fact that I thought initially that she was nervous to be there. Now that she started speaking, she seems like she's more confident and more relaxed than with what they're asking her. Thank you. I couldn't remember. Naval Air Training and Operating Procedures Standardization. I was going to say it's the SOP, but it's Standard Operating Procedures for pilots. But I just couldn't remember offhand what it stood for. It's been a long time, and I've been through a lot since then, okay? Take it easy on me, will ya? I could ask Mr. Squid what it meant, but I couldn't remember. It's that skill fade sometimes. And also with the being live, sometimes things don't come to my brain as quickly as they would if I was just having a conversation with somebody that's in front of me. Or when you're in chat and you're like, oh, I got this. And then when you're live and you go to think about it, it's like, it doesn't exactly come out that easy. Yeah, but you don't have to use ham these days. Just attach Starlink system. Wham, bam, thank you, ma'am. Get to go home in 6 months to 5 years, depending on the court martial. Yeah, you get to go home in 5 years, and while you spend those 5 years turning big rocks into little rocks at Leavenworth.
Can you recall a circumstance where the published field elevation varied significantly from where you initiated the checklist procedure in your career?
As part of the checklist procedure, we don't attempt to determine if the elevation is different based on where the aircraft is parked. We base it off of the field elevation.
Okay. I'm just going to we've talked about field elevation being published at FAA or, some kind of, whether in another country, there's published data available. What if you're at a remote or unfamiliar airfield, you're operating there? Is there another resource you might use other than published chart, or would you rely on the topography of the chart itself in that situation?
I would rely on the known field elevation if there was one for where I was landing and taking off from. And in my experience, I would have generally departed from somewhere where I had an altimeter setting. And if I did not know what the field elevation was or was unable to determine it, I would maintain that altimeter setting until I was back in location to receive an updated altimeter setting.
Okay, noted. Yeah, I'm just trying to approach the situation from as many angles as possible. When you're flying in the national airspace system versus flying on deployment,
You can tell that although these experts have very high level of education in aeronautics and engineering, they are not military, and it shows. So she's looking like the look that she's giving them when she's answering these questions is like, she reminds me of me, and in a way where I'm like, how do you not know? Like, what do you mean deployment? Like, what do you mean if I don't know? Like, not realizing that they've never been on there's a good chance that they've never been on a deployment to know.
Deployment outside of the national airspace system, for example, do these procedures change at all, or there's more emphasis done in the NAS versus on deployment, or does it remain the same?
There's no difference in how we approach setting altimeters when we're operating in the national airspace system versus on a deployment.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to incorporate Mr. Bradham into this line of questioning as well, so I just want to totally lean on Mrs. Lewis. So, Mr. Bradham, during flight, how would a pilot determine the barometric altimeter is erroneous and unreliable?
Yeah, so in my experience, the only time we've done that in flight right on the ground check, if you had a significant difference, between the right and the left side in the ground check before you took off. And I want to point out that ground check exists. The FAA uses that same, in the Airman Information Manual, uses a similar check with plus or minus 75 feet. But yes, and in flight again, if I saw if there was a significant disparity between the right and left side while you were flying, and I mean a significant disparity, more than 70, 80 feet, right? You would make note of that and come back. But if ATC contacted the aircraft and said, hey, you're not at your right altitude, and we were, according to our instruments, that then would be cause for concern. But otherwise, and I've, in my experience, I'm trying to recall if that's ever happened to me where I've had a barometric altimeter problem like that, and I don't recall one.
Okay. Yeah, Ms. Lewis, you previously mentioned being queried by ATC. Have you ever experienced that in your career, or thought to a situation where you might want to question whether or not the left and right side altimeters were comparable?
I have not had an experience in my career flying the Blackhawk where the barometric altimeter, if it passed the checks on the ground, was unreliable.
Okay, thank you. Let's say hypothetically you had a crew and the two pilots did detect an offset between the right and left baro altimeters. I'll start with Ms. Lewis. What would they do? And then as a follow-up, would there be anything in the Army's operational procedures that would require the pilots to make a report or report it to maintenance?
If there was a discrepancy between the left and the right pilot's altimeter, are you asking which altimeter we would use?
Well, no, not which one you would use, but you've detected this discrepancy. It's more than 70 feet. Is there a requirement to report that then to maintenance, your command, make a note of it somewhere?
I don't know if there's a requirement, but these pilots are picky as fuck. They would bitch even if there wasn't a problem. They would bitch if there was a 10-foot problem. Like, if you know pilots, you know that they complain every time there's a small smidgen, even if something is within specs. That's when you as a maintainer have to unplug it, plug it back in, and say reseated connector works as advertised.
Yes, if there was a greater than 70-foot difference, that aircraft would not be flown. It would be placed on a grounding red X condition and be taken out of service until the altitude discrepancy was addressed.
Okay.
I don't know the Army specs, and I don't know exactly what their process is for maintenance, but I do know pilots. And I know pilots get specific, and I know pilots get bitchy. And I know pilots get kind of perspective loss when it comes to what's wrong with their aircraft. Hence the OFF position shit, like not realizing that OFF is off. They lose perspective when they're focused on other shit. They would bitch about everything. Yeah, I don't either. Based on this, I don't think so either. So, hey, Squid Base. Put us home from day surgery with Jay, feeling groggy, so I'll watch later. Hit the like button. Yes, if you haven't hit the like button, please do. Please do. And if you are watching and you are not subscribed, please consider subscribing. We are on our way to 4,100. We are trying to get to 5K by next year would be the goal. We'll see how it goes. But I would appreciate if everybody could subscribe. Hang out with us. We cover more than just this, but this is the my hot topic for the current occasion. And I know it's not popular with everybody, but I love it because I love aviation and I want to figure out what the F is wrong with people. But Paul, feel better. Alrighty.
Come back to this question, and you touched on it previously. You said you preferred a different altimeter for different type of operation, different flight regime. In the Army procedures, is there ever an operational area where you would cross-check between the barometric altimeter and the radar altimeter?
In my experience, in a situation where I was flying close to the ground, maybe 500 feet and below, if I was supposed to be at an MSL altitude, but I was flying low to the ground, I would, in my experience, I would be referencing or cross-checking both instruments in that situation.
Okay, I understand it would be difficult because it would depend on where you're operating. If you're over sea level, obviously that calculation is much easier.
And this is them and their connection not being great. This is not me for once.
More into
my internet is fine.
Discussion. So it's discussed in our internal investigation. If you're flying in visual conditions during the day, what would the altitude visually that the pilot could recognize would 100 feet difference be something that pilots are trained to know visually without reference to any instruments versus maybe 1,000 feet? Mr. Bradham or Ms. Lewis can take that.
Yeah, I'll give my experience.
Yeah.
And when you're very low to the ground, that's true, right? To be able to tell the difference between 100 feet and 200 feet, I would say yes. But at a much higher altitude, then the difference between 4,000 feet and 4,100 feet, no.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So you're at higher altitude, also you can maybe tell the difference of thousands versus lower. Let's see. Would this change at night? If you were, low level flight, you say, I can tell the difference between 100 and 200 feet at night. Would you expect that calculation to be the same? I'll ask Miss Lewis.
It's always more difficult to determine your altitude when flying at night, but I agree with what Mr. Bradham said, that if you're very low level, 200 feet and below, it's a little bit easier to determine, but even at 1,000 feet, 100 feet of difference is not something that in my experience, that I'd be able to accurately determine.
Sure, and then a quick follow-up there. If you're wearing night vision goggles, I guess, can you expand on the possibility of doing that under NVG at low level?
NVG is low level. If I have, it would help if there were known obstacles that I knew the height of as I was flying in the area out to the left and right of the aircraft. It really depends on what environment I'm flying in, what obstacles are there, buildings. It would really just depend on where you were flying out, how easy it was to determine a difference in 100 feet of altitude when looking outside the aircraft.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
Just to follow up on Mr. Payne's question, for both Mrs. Lewis and Mr. Bradham, if you were flying in day visual conditions, could you notice a difference between flying at 200 feet versus 300 feet?
So, just time stamping 152 something, they mentioned the NVGs for the first time. So, just for our good friend Spawn, who's not here, and he's not here because it's the middle of the night where he lives and he should be resting. However, I have to let him know because that is he is interested in the NVGs as a possible issue. However, do they address the conversation between the pilots as a possible cause? Not yet. However, this is a 3-day hearing and we are only an hour and 53 minutes into day one. So anything is possible. We still got lots of time left, which means lots of streaming and 205 docket entries with thousands and thousands and thousands of pages. So it's kind of a, Gail, I love you, but we're only an hour and a half into a 3-day adventure. Don't put the cart before the horse. We gotta break this down into baby steps because it's a very large topic. So they're breaking it down into 5 separate windows. And they called it something, but I can't remember exactly what they called it. Frames, I think. And they called it, let's see, panels, 5 different panels. And panel 1 is this one. It's overview of accidents, helicopter, air data systems, and altimeters. So it's, so there's that Chief Warrant Officer is Kylene Lewis. She's Department of Evaluation and Standardization, Fort Rucker, Alabama. Scott Rosengren, UH-60 Chief Engineer, Huntsville, Alabama. Steve Branham, Chief Airworthiness Engineer, Huntsville, Alabama. Dan Cooper, Senior Technical Fellow, Avionics Systems, Integration and Testing from Sikorsky, Stratford, Connecticut. And Lance T. Gant, Chief Scientist and Tech Advisor for Rotorcraft, FAA, out of Fort Worth, Texas. So there's the issues that they're going to be looking at. Yeah, I know, and I know everybody wants to know, but I don't know because I am watching this at the same time as you. So I am watching this at the exact same time as you. Hi, hun. Hi. You got jammies on and everything? She came in with her sunglasses on, grabbed her bike, and rode out. Issues are, and this is what I'm looking at. So let me take this off and show you what I'm looking at. Let's see. Oh, there we go. StreamYard has changed how they're processing this. She has an inside bike and an outside bike. Her pedal or her tricycle is outside, and her the bike with her balance bike is her inside bike because it's so hot. She can ride her balance bike in the house without an issue. So this is what I'm looking at. So this is, and I'm doing this different. This is a slideshow. So whoop. We're gonna do this a little bit different. There we go. And how? There we go. Take me off. The issues that we are looking at: helicopter static pressure and altimeter systems, static system error, vice instrument error of the altimeter, total error effects of the accuracy of barometric altitude, military design standards for Army rotorcraft, FAA design standards for parts 27 and 29, challenges in designing air data systems for helicopters and how that impacts accuracy of instruments and systems using air data, helicopter altimeter accuracy standards, checks, and verification, air data accuracy for flight recorders, FAA, and then Army. And then exhibits are in the exhibit list. So yeah, from what I saw earlier, they're partially blaming the altimeter and said that duplicated the issues in other Blackhawks. So my question is, why haven't they grounded them for repairs? One, I have absolutely no idea. Secondly, bring me back up. Secondly, is it how? My question is, I worked on fixed wing aircraft, so I really have this is me asking questions and not being a subject matter expert by any means. How accurate is the air pressure with the downwash of a rotor wash? How accurate is that at 200 feet or 300 feet and below anyway, when you're not moving very fast? Like how, and they have 3 systems for redundancy, but at that lower speed, I don't know exactly what their airspeed was, but at lower speeds and lower altitudes, that rotor wash has to affect your air pressure. So when you're dealing with a pressure altimeter, is it going to be accurate at all? How accurate is it to begin with? Because of the rotor wash. Better yet, they knew it had nothing to do with the crash. And I'm pretty sure they're asking these questions for just to get it out of the way, and not because it actually had a lot to do with it. Oh, remove. There we go. There we go. All right.
That's a difficult question to answer. From my experience, I would have to say that would depend very much on the terrain that was around and how familiar I was with that terrain.
I would agree with that statement. It would depend on where I was flying, and as I mentioned previously, if I knew the height of some of the obstacles or perhaps building or terrain in the area.
So to clarify, if you were not familiar with the terrain that you were flying through, then what does the answer change?
Can you just restate the question once just to make sure?
If you're not familiar with the terrain you're flying through, could you pick up on a difference visually looking out the window between flying at 200 feet versus 300 feet? Is there enough of a difference at those altitudes?
Yeah, that's a difficult question to answer. I'm not sure if you'd be able to resolve that difference.
I agree. I don't know that I could 100% accurately determine the difference in altitude.
And my question was for Dave. So just to confirm my understanding, at night and under NVGs, it would be even more difficult to make that distinction?
Yes.
Thank you.
That was my kind of operations related section. I'm going to shift gears slightly for my last few to Mr. Cooper, discussing some differences between the Mike and Lima model. So Mr. Cooper, please describe the pedostatic system design on the Mike model. Sorry, for the audience, the Mike model would be a newer version of the helicopter. If you want to just expand on that rather than me explain the different, why don't we just talk about the differences as well?
Again, it has its own set of requirements, to their vehicle, different engines, different, more capable rotor blades. So, but from
Happy anniversary, Tammy. I will see you another time. Bye.
from an air data system, it utilizes the same pedostatic probes in the same location as the Lima. That is unchanged. It employs air data computers, ADCs. There is less plumbing because there are no, I will call them analog instruments equivalent to what is in the Alpha or Lima. So those probes feed directly, they feed the air data computers. The air data computers feed multi-function displays with digital data. So they're, and then those same ADCs through a redundant path provides air data information to the flight controls or any other subsystems within the aircraft which needs that information. There are two ADCs. Each go to their respective pitot probe, and the static, just as with the Alpha and Lima, is crossed. So there's a redundancy there.
Okay, so in summary, you've replaced, you said, well, older analog digital systems, there's less tubing because you have two ADCs and a glass panel display. I guess my ultimate question would be, given the differences between the Lima and the Mike, would you expect more accuracy out of the Mike versus the Lima in terms of displayed altitude?
Again, we talked about static source error and instrument error. I would expect improved accuracy for the instrument error aspect. The static source error is not changed.
Thank you. I'm going to pass the microphone over to Michael Portman, aerospace engineer from the Flight Recorders Lab. He's going to discuss air data accuracy for flight recorders.
Thank you very much. All right.
Congratulations, Roy. Give her my best. I am so happy to hear that. Yay! Like, oh my goodness. Very well. I mean, I hope that she makes a full recovery and that you get years and years and years and years and years together. Every time that I close the door, she comes and she drop kicks it open.
All right, good morning. So yes, as Mr. Payne mentioned, I'm going to start my questions with some design requirement questions for flight recorders. So I'll start with Mr. Gant on the civil side. What requirements exist for flight recorders in civil helicopters?
So for flight data recorders, there's a requirement in Part 91, which are the general operating rules, that if you are operating a multi-engine turbine-powered helicopter with a seating or passenger capacity of 10 or more, you must have a flight data recorder that records the parameters that are contained in an appendix. I think it's Appendix E, but of Part 91 that lists all the parameters as well as the accuracy requirements for those parameters.
Okay, and that was for Part 91. Are there equivalents in other operating parts as well?
Yeah, Part 135 has a very similar requirement for, again, multi-engine turbine-powered helicopters with 10 or more passenger seating capacity. There's another break if you have a helicopter that carries 20 or more. There's a different FDR requirement, but still one.
Okay. Can you expand for a moment on, you mentioned that included in these appendices, there's also standards for accuracy of the data. Can you expand on that a little bit, specifically if you know anything about the altitude data?
Yeah, I think in the Part 91 Appendix E, I'll say the standards as I read them are fairly loose. I mean, for accuracy for the altimeter, I think it reads from anywhere from plus or minus 100 to up to plus or minus 750 feet with a resolution of, I can't remember, either 130 feet or 150 feet on readout.
Thank you. One more question for you, Mr. Gant. What methods does the FAA require to ensure the continued accuracy of recorded flight data?
Yeah, so there's no specific rule that says how often you need to be, I'll say, interrogating a installed FDR to see if it's still providing realistic data. However, in the technical standard order, as well as in our advisory material, it is incumbent upon either the manufacturer of the FDR or the installer to come up with a maintenance program. And then our recommendation in the advisory material and AC 21-141B is that a reasonableness check for the FDR should not exceed being done beyond 18 months.
Okay, thank you very much. Turning to Mr. Rosengren. So looking at the design of the flight recorder system on the UH-60L, it's my understanding that the system was added after the initial production of the UH-60L. Can you just explain a little bit about when that occurred and what the motivation was for installing that system?
Yes, sir. So it was we call it a commercial off-the-shelf or COTS solution that we bought for the Integrated Vehicle Health Monitoring System, IVHMS. It included both a health and usage monitoring system, so a PCMCA card that a data card. I can't tell you what PCMCA stands for. A data card that you could pull out and download the parametric data that's also sent to the flight data recorder that we used for accident investigation, such as this. And so that IVHMS, the Integrated Vehicle Health Monitoring System, produced COTS. It was around the mid 2000s. So in 2005 and 6 is when.
That's their connection, not mine.
Consulted with our who we purchased this.
Let's
component
come on.
Modification work. We got an airworthiness release from the Airworthiness Authority modification work order and then before we went through the installation.
Okay, and then I'll follow up specifically on the parametric data side of things. Did you have any standards or ideas that you had for what sort of things you wanted to be recorded or what accuracy you wanted those things to be recorded with?
So the main reason we were putting the system on was twofold. It was for the health and usage monitoring system, which as the gentleman referred to, is our maintenance program that we use. So we download those parametric data after each flight or weekly, and then we take a look at the data, make sure that
eyes are kind of freaky.
regime recognition. So by regime recognition, that's where we try to determine how the aircraft was flown, so that if we have any particular parts lives that are depending on how aggressive or non-aggressive you fly the aircraft is dependent, then we can determine that from the parametric data that regime was in, and then we can decrement the parts lives appropriately.
Thank you. Next question. Which standards, or are there standards that exist that the Army uses or requires for the accuracy of the recorded flight data on the UH-60L?
So we had a digital source collector operation requirements document back from 1996. We have to provide that if we haven't done that already. And in that standard, it was encouraged to have a commercial off-the-shelf solution, for which we did. So we didn't give the vendor we bought the commercial off-the-shelf solution from a data accuracy requirement. We did make sure that since it was commercial off-the-shelf, we made sure that it met the airworthiness requirements, but that it was capable to do the health and usage monitoring system requirement, as well as the flight data recorder function.
Thank you. Can you describe how the Army verifies the function and accuracy of the flight recorder upon installation?
Yeah, so at the end of the modification work order, there's a maintenance test flight that's performed. And as that maintenance test flight is performed, we have a maintenance operations check and MOC. And in that MOC, we record what the displayed altitude or other parameters are. Select not all, but select some. I'll be happy to provide that table to you. And then we record what was recorded in the parametric data.
All right, and then a follow-up to that. Can you describe similar thing, how the Army ensures the continued function and accuracy of the flight recorder in operation?
Sure. So as I mentioned, each time the particular installations occurred, we do those maintenance test flights and we do the MOCs to make sure that the installation was successful. As we improved the system over time, we went through a substantial upgrade back in 2008, where the original 2005 system did not have an integrated flight data recorder. So the 2008 version, we put the integrated flight data recorder, of which we have the configuration today. We've had several software upgrades. During each software upgrade, they do a system integration lab test at the factory to make sure that the software performs as designed. And then we go through a similar airworthiness analysis of the MWO with the updated software. And then that MWO is then updated. And again, each time it's installed, we do the maintenance test flight and then do the maintenance operation check at the end to make sure that the data is correct.
And just to clarify, are there any requirements for downloads at certain times specifically to verify the function and accuracy of the recorded data itself?
So we download the data at the end of each flight. It's available for download and put into our data warehouse that we monitor through artificial intelligence and other means to make sure that the data is reasonable, and so that's performed on a regular basis. And is that specifically for you mentioned for doing usage and vibration analysis and whatnot? Is that specifically for that, or is it to look at a broad spectrum of parameters? Yeah, there's three specific parameters we look at. I can get to those particular parts, but there's three specific parameters we look at to make sure the vibration data is not over any exceedances. And if those particular parameters are over exceedances, then we do an on-condition change to those parts. Okay, thank you. I'm moving on to some operational questions.
This
I'm gonna stick with you, Mr. Rosengren.
This is fascinating, and I'm sorry I'm not saying a whole lot, and I'm not answering any questions that y'all might have, but talking amongst yourselves in the chat with Roy, and then that's awesome, Roy. I'm so happy for you guys, and I hope it continues that way. But this is completely fascinating to me, just listening to when they did stuff, comparing it to when I was in, because I was in 2008, and be it I was not Army, it is still fascinating to think about what we did, and hearing what they did on the Blackhawk at about the same time that we did upgrades on our planes.
How is the flight recorder data used within the Army? I know you'd mentioned that it's mostly used for this vibration analysis. Is there any other example of, or any times that you can think of where download of the FDR data or the flight recorder data of any type has been performed for reasons other than those you had mentioned?
In the operational Army, there has been programs over the years where we try to do a flight operations quality assurance type of effort. So those efforts have been done where we use the downloaded data to do flight recreations, mission rehearsals, those sorts of things, but that never got out to the operational Army.
Okay. Can you describe how the data is downloaded?
Sure. There's the data card that gets pulled out of the system, and then that's taken to an aircraft notebook, a laptop computer, and you input into the laptop computer, and then there's a procedure to extract the files and get it into the cloud-based system where we store data.
And he is the chief engineer, so he's got a smart. He's kind of smart.
Another question for you. When looking through the data, we did notice that that there is no GPS global positioning system data that is recorded on the flight recorder. Can you just explain why that is?
Yeah, as was mentioned before, the 60 Lima is an analog aircraft. And so when we did the modification work order and the installation to put the system on the aircraft, we got those, the signals that were available, and those signals were not available for incorporation into the integrated vehicle health monitoring system.
Thank you.
Most
One last question as I'm wrapping.
most aircraft are analog aircraft. Most military aircraft. We were still dealing with stuff from like 50s and 60s technology in the early 2000s or early to mid 2000s. So analog technology is still around. So you think that it's not and that everything is digital. Analog technology is still very much real and alive. It's very low quality, but it's still there.
Up this time for Mrs. Lewis. On the UH-60L, the air data transducer provides pressure altitude information to the heads-up display. I'm curious, in your experience, have you ever done a cross-check while using the heads-up display between that altitude and the altitude that's in the barometric altimeter?
Sir, in my experience, using the heads-up display would be for low-level flight during under night vision goggles, and I would not be referencing barometric altitude in my heads-up display.
All right, thank you very much. I'll turn it back over to Mr. Shin.
Mr. Fuchs, can you pull up Exhibit 7 Kilo Juliet, page 23? For the witnesses, that's the presentation backup slides that has a diagram for the right barometric altimeter and the uncorrected pressure altitude that it feeds to the helicopter's transponder for the UH-60L, and how that pressure altitude data gets transmitted to ATC ground radar and also out to ADSB. So, Mr. Bradham, on this...
And Gail, old instruments, it's cheaper to keep repairing them and sending them to, in the Navy we call it AIMD, than to replace and redesign the whole airframe and the whole inside, because then you've got to go back to the manufacturer. And the manufacturer has to, well, yeah, I meant compared to like 2025. As far as fixing it, I mean, digital, yeah, is more reliable. Yeah, but it's a whole lot easier to just keep fixing what's already there than to redesign the whole aircraft. It's cheaper, it's easier. It's part of the reason that our ATC systems suck, because it was just easier to keep fixing it, and now you can't find parts. And that's part of the problem with still working with analog stuff, is there's not many manufacturers of the parts. So parts, you can only fix them so many times before you can't fix them anymore. And you can't replace parts anymore. It's why it's a nightmare. It's a mess. Like, it's just a mess from top to bottom. It's just a mess. And it's part of this transition from the technology from the 70s and the 80s to the technology of the 2000s and 2020s and all of that. It happened so fast that the aviation industry can't keep up. So, I'm honestly, I would hope so, because like I said, sidebar to get into that, love or hate his plan. This is the first president in my lifetime that I've seen actually have a plan. Like it or hate it, it's a written down plan. And it's a written down plan, and they've already put funding, partial funding for it in that big, beautiful bill or whatever it was. There's already partial funding for it. So like it or hate it, at least a plan is a plan. In my opinion, a plan that I might not be 100% happy with is still better than no plan at all. So there's that. Swidbro troubleshoot a shorted wire gate pain in the backside. Well, considering the frickin', have you ever looked at the displays in the back of an E2? Have you ever tried to pull out an E2 display from the CICU and try to reach your, there's a reason that nope. Contortion yourself back in there to work on a wire bundle and fix a connector pin. No. I would rather. there is so more. Did not mean to derail, but he has money. He already has earmarked money, lots of money. Well, there's money in the budget every year. And then there was extra money. I'm not sure exactly how much. I will have to actually look at the bill that passed, but they had asked for more funding for the ATC project in that bill. How much they actually got it is how much they actually got. I'm not sure. I haven't actually looked at the final bill, at least that part of it. There's a lot of other stuff that people are complaining about a little bit more than the ATC funding. So we've had to do some fact checking with the other stuff first, like the Medicare fraud and Medicaid fraud. But yes, now try that on an ejection seat in EA6B. No, I don't like EA6Bs. EA6Bs knock you off your feet. Freaking out if you find a loose seat pin. No, thank you. Nope. I will pass. There's a reason we didn't have ejection seats. You had an overhead hatch and a prayer.
On the UH-60L, if the right barometric altimeter provided inaccurate altitude indications, regardless of the source of the error, would the transponder transmit that inaccurate pressure altitude through to ground stations?
Yeah, so the transponder on the right side has an encoder, and the encoder sends a signal in 100-foot increments, and that signal is based on pressure altitude, so it's referenced to 2992 as the Colesman window. So if the pilot made a mistake and put the wrong Colesman window setting in, or the setting was not indicative of the true static pressure, that error would not be transmitted. But any other errors in the system would be transmitted. But the encoder is transmitted in, it's only in 100-foot increments. So yeah, cool. Thank you.
And Mrs. Lewis, for the UH-60L, are there procedures for what pilots should do with the transponder's functions if they detect that the right barometric altimeter has become unreliable during flight?
For the UH-60 Lima, the transponder is required for flight. So if there was an issue with the transponder, the aircraft would return to whatever station it departed from, and that issue would be addressed before flight was continued with that aircraft.
I'm sorry if I may, could I just add one point that the encoder, it's sending in 100-foot increments. It changes at the 50-foot mark, but the standard is at the 50-foot mark plus or minus 40 feet. So it can be 90 feet off inside its specification. Thank you.
And Mrs. Lewis, to clarify, if the right barometric altimeter was determined to be unreliable during the flight, knowing that it transmits its encoded altitude to the transponder, is there any procedures to disable the altitude reporting function of the transponder, or do you just leave it alone?
There's no published procedure for addressing that I'm aware of.
Would you notify ATC of the discrepancy that's identified flying in the National Airspace System?
I would.
Mrs. Lewis, going back to one of the previous questions about cross-checking between the left and right altimeters, and this is a question that Mr. Bradham can answer as well. Is there a published procedure for pilots to cross-check between the left and right side for accuracy between the two altimeters?
The check is against field elevation. It's not between the two altimeters. So the 70-foot error, if field elevation was 0 feet, one could be 70 feet and the other one could show minus 70 feet. So it's not an error between, it's not checking for error between the two, it's the setting against field elevation.
Yeah, no, I concur.
Timothy, dropping the injector seat malfunction.
A discrepancy between the left and right barometric altimeters identified during flight, let's say on the order of 100 feet. Mrs. Lewis, how would you verbalize that, or how would you triage that with the other pilot?
If there was a difference of around 100 feet, that's to maintain within 100 feet of altitude is the standard for us flying. So if it was right at about 100 feet, that would not give me much cause for alarm because it would still be within the standard of maintaining altitude within plus or minus 100 feet.
Mr. Bradham, when you were saying the additional 40-foot change on the transponder altitude, do you have documentation of that you could provide?
So the encoder standards, it's mil spec 81852, which was the mil spec for the altimeter. When you in the encoder section, it says the standard is at the 50-foot mark plus or minus 40 feet from that. And I'll so It's in Mill A 81852. It's paragraph 356. And under encoder, it said the switching point shall be at altitudes 50 feet plus or minus 40 feet removed from the nominal indicated altitude.
Thank you very much.
So not
And
crashing
Michael,
into the
please ask your
ground.
question.
Sorry to circle back. Just one last question for Mr. Gant. In Part 135, Appendix E, you had mentioned that there were standards for accuracy, in this case for altitude, that can vary between plus or minus 100 feet to plus or minus 700 feet. Can you clarify that those standards are plus or minus 100 feet that is recorded on the FDR as compared to what?
I would have to defer that question to get back with you folks.
Okay, thank you.
I'm smart, but I don't
Mr. Gant,
know.
the FAA has
offhand.
several restricted category UH-60L helicopters that are approved for civil use, including the Lima model. What are the static system and barometric altimeter design requirements for these restricted category helicopters?
So the FAA regulations for bringing in surplus military aircraft that have been designed and manufactured for use by the U.S. military, given a satisfactory operating history, which usually is at least 10 years, if they are surplus and they are determined to be airworthy by the FAA, they can come into the system utilizing, I'll say, the military records as well as military flight manuals. There will be no additional showing to the FAA to bring those aircraft and put them under registry under restricted category. And under restricted category, that severely limits operations, mainly to agricultural, external load operations, and forest and wildlife management, which usually translates into firefighting operations.
Mrs. Lewis, can you just clarify for us, when flying low level, what would be the primary instrument you would reference for altitude?
The radar altimeter, in my experience.
And would that change when flying on a helicopter route with a ceiling?
If it's a published MSL route, I would still be referencing radar altitude, but I would also be taking barometric altitude into more consideration than what I normally would be if I was flying at a low altitude, if that makes sense.
Okay. And is that so if I understand you correctly, you'd be referencing low altitude on a MSL route with a ceiling. You'd be referencing both the rad alt and the barometric altimeter.
He's not supposed to use acronyms in short. Rad alt is radar altimeter. So I feel stupid. What are they talking about? The up and down? Yeah, they're talking about. Sorry, I'm AT1 distracted me with this comment. Enterprise World Cruise in 89 and 90, your beloved incompetent E2 air crews, it's so routinely failed to retract the wire and drogues that we ran out of drogues for 3 weeks. There is a HF trailing wire radio, HF1 radio that was trailing wire. I think it was HF1. HF2 was the wire from the cockpit to the horizontal stabs. But anyway, I digress. It was supposed to it went out 60 feet, and it was supposed to you're supposed to retract it back in and suck it back up into the aircraft before you land. Sometimes one of the major errors with this radio, and why I hated when they used it, was that sometimes that part would break and it would not retract. So they would have to cut it, and then we'd have to climb up in the ass end of the aircraft and replace it. Well, because dropping the tail hook cut it. Well, sometimes they forget that it's out, and they forget to retract it back into the aircraft, and then the ATs have to fix it, and they send it to AIMD where AT1 was, and say, "Hey, they fucked it up again," and you're losing this big orange. It's a drogue, but you put 880 feet. Well, they would only use it for so what is it? The higher the frequency, the farther it went out. This is where my skill fade. They would only bring it out to a certain, at least in my day, they would only use it for certain things and certain frequencies. So it only would come out. They would never take it out the full distance, because the one time they did is when it didn't work. And so they would only bring it out so far, but when they dropped the tail hook, it would cut. If they only brought it out that far, we could just put another I called it a cone because it literally looked like an orange cone. It was just heavy. And lower the frequency, longer the antenna. Thank you. This is where my skill fade comes in. I used to know all this shit. I used to have this education. I went to school for that shit, but that's also before I went to school for human movement and anatomy. So, you know, and before I had surgery, only when they need it. So there's a shit ton of radios on that plane. It's like the Navy's version of an AWACS. There's a whole lot of radios on that plane, so they didn't use it very often. But when they used it, and they forgot to retract it back into the aircraft, once you drop the tail hook, it cuts it. Sometimes if there's enough wire, you can, now I'm remembering more as I'm talking about it. AT1, can you tell? As I'm talking about it more, I'm remembering things. If there was still a lot of wire on it, you could just put another drogue on it and it'd be fine. But if there wasn't, because it never would go out, it would never go out all the way, only when it was broken. It only went out to a certain distance, and it wasn't 880 feet. So it's a very, 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 yeah. So the new information had to push the older information out of your brain to make room. And yeah, it's kind of, if you don't use it, you lose it. Like, I used to be able to cite specs and stuff. And even though I wasn't a boom expert, I talked to enough ordies to be able to tell you things or to be able to know things. And now I'm like, I look at an aircraft and I'm like, is that right? It only went out to the tune length in theory. Yeah, in theory. So when they cut it, sometimes they could cut it manually, but if they dropped the tail hook, it would cut it automatically. So it only went out. But when we tested it, we only tested it out to I want to say 60 or 80 feet. So that way you weren't standing 80 feet behind an aircraft with holding this orange cone in your hand. It, in the middle of the flight line, oh, God forbid, hoping you don't get run over by another aircraft. You're just we always made the airmen do it too, the E3s, because the E4s and E5s would be in the plane, because it's why am I standing out here? We made the E3 stand in the middle of the flight line. Yeah, right above the sonar buoy with the radio wire. It comes and it has moments where I'm like, I know this, I can see it, I can picture it in my head, but I can't remember what the fuck it's called. All right, let's get back to this. She's actually answering these questions a lot better than I initially would have given her credit for when I saw her yesterday.
Yes.
And is that trained or is that a personal technique?
There's no standard for which instrument I would be looking at, but if I'm on an MSL route, I would have to be at some point referencing the barometric altitude to maintain the route altitude.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, my question I think really was, is that a procedure that's trained in the Army to cross-reference those two instruments, one on a route of that nature, or is that more of a personal technique for you?
I would say that's more of a personal experience-based technique for me, but also coming back to if I'm on a published MSL route, the only way for me to maintain the prescribed altitude for that route would be to utilize my barometric altimeter as well.
Understood. Thank you.
Chairman Hamidi, that will complete the technical panel's questions.
Thank you very much.
Long story short, they use more than one altimeter and type of altimeter to figure out how high they are. They don't just rely on one thing, because that's where the redundancy comes in. You know what I mean? It's just, yeah. One of our drills was to hand crank out the radio wire. It was a 3-hour drill with 2 people. Oh, no. You have fun with that.
Going to take a 15-minute break. We'll be back and start promptly at 11:35.
So 15 minutes would put us at 2:35. See, this is where we skip breaks and such while we do. This is honestly probably where we should have stopped yesterday. We should have gone this extra hour, but you know, it is what it is.
Airline, I'm going to start with alphabetical. We'll change it up every single time. So we'll start with the Airline Pilots Association.
Thank you, Chairman. This first question is going to be for Chief Warrant Officer, Ms. Lewis. You spoke about referencing barometric altitude while flying an MSL or a mean sea level altitude route. If the maximum altitude for the route is 200 feet MSL, would an error of up to 130 feet affect your operation and ability to fly that altitude accurately?
What's the 130-foot error that you're referencing?
So
One radar altimeter is good for overland unless you're too low, or unless you are too low or too high over water. And I'm wondering how not only the low altitude flying over a river, because obviously a river is not that wide, you know, not that wide, going from over water to overland consistently, the low altitude, the NVGs, this just sounds like a fucking recipe for disaster. Like the more I'm hearing about all the, because these are things that skill fade, and we don't fly at 200 feet. Like, I'm sorry, the lowest we fly is like 8,000 feet. Like, you know, oh yeah, and the depth of the water, I'm sure, would affect certain things too. This is where people that are smarter than me, and everybody in that room is smarter than me. It's just, okay, I'm going to have to go to sleep. It's coming on 3 a.m. Was an early morning. We'll catch up later. Bye, Timothy. Yeah, and that's what I was like. It was almost like a Final Destination moment. Like if anything would have gone differently, mainly if she would have been under her 200-foot ceiling, which I think is one of the reasons that they're hammering the radar and their altimeters, is the sense of she was not below her 200-foot ceiling. She had a 200-foot ceiling that she was supposed to stay under, and not once did she ever get below that 200 feet. Every time she got close to it, she jumped back up. And that, in my opinion, and it is my belief that this is one of the reasons that they're focusing on this first, is to eliminate or confirm whether the altimeters could have been a problem. And if it was the problem, they have an easy answer, so to speak. It was an instrument problem that caused her to be above 200 feet. Like, so it, you know, it's just, it's Jeffrey, I put it in the Discord. I'm just kidding. I know not everybody can come on right away, and I know multiple people are live at this time, but, you know, need to know now the pulse width of a radar altimeter for how low. Also, type of water makes a difference, as salt water behaves differently than fresh. Yeah, and I do understand that this is why they have to train, because all of these things are a factor, which also goes into the fact of why were they crossing an active runway with civilian aircraft. It just fucking, like, to me, that never should have been, to me, that never should have happened. Like, you should not put civilian lives in danger for a military exercise. Even if it's a routine exercise, nothing in the military is routine. We all know nothing in the military is routine. Hey, Squaw Bob, how are you? Jeffrey, considering we're listening to this at 1.3 speed, you're going to have fun. It's going to sound like Alvin and the Chipmunks. But we will get back into this. The Airline Pilots Association is currently asking questions.
That's the specific potential altitude deviation we saw from 100 to 135 or 130 feet of the exemplar aircraft that was flying. So it's the potential barometric altitude discrepancy that we saw between the exemplar helos.
No, it would not affect my ability to fly that route as long as the aircraft altimeter setting is within 70 feet of field elevation for both the pilot and co-pilot altimeters. It would not affect my ability to fly that route.
Okay. Second question is going to be for Mr. Gant. As previously discussed, the NTSB and the Collins, they calculate a conceptual static error between the two systems. The error was calculated as 135 to 193 feet, depending on the assumed speed deviation. How does this affect safety of flight for helicopter routes with a maximum ceiling of 200 feet?
I'm not sure I fully understand the question.
So there was a conceptual static error that was calculated based on the forward speed of the helicopters. It was between 135 feet, 193 feet. This is from the airworthiness factual report on page 53. How do you think that error, that altitude error of 135 to 193 feet, can affect the safety of flight for helicopter routes that have a maximum ceiling of 200 feet MSL?
Yeah, I'm going to defer an opinion on that. My area is really around the airworthiness of the aircraft and not the operational aspects, flying routes, low-level routes.
Would anyone else on the panel like to respond for us on that one?
I believe you're referring to Collins did an analysis to determine when the airspeed capsule light would come on in terms of a difference between the two sides, but that's not what the airspeed capsule light. I'm not aware the airspeed capsule light was actually illuminated. I think that was just an attempt by Collins to, I'd be speculating to the intent, but I think that's what the analysis was trying to say, and I'm not sure. I just recall those numbers.
Yeah, I concur. Collins was trying to identify when alert may be provided to the crew, what level of error. It did not mean that error was existing, and that alert is for something else. It's for flight path stabilization fault. It doesn't mean that error occurs. It's just they were trying to evaluate what could, at what limit would alert crew, and was that trying to scope the magnitude of the error that was present.
Thank you, sir. The next question that is for you also, Mr. Cooper. Considering the increased airspace congestion across our continental United States, should older aircraft like the UH-60 Lima model, which lack a bit of modern instrumentation and rely on legacy systems, be more aggressively phased out, given that there's an increased potential risk in operations with commercial traffic?
I'm sorry, I think that's speculation, and my role is in engineering, design, and test, so I don't think I can count.
Yeah, don't speculation, objection, speculation. I do. So Roy brought up a good point, 2 good points actually, except that exercise was to evacuate key personnel in an emergency situation. I have my pushback on not your comment, but like the situation as a whole would be if it's an emergency situation, 1, nothing would be flying in and out of DC, so the route wouldn't be an issue. So couldn't you train with NVGs on a different route and do a check ride with NVGs on a route that doesn't cross a civilian airspace? Yeah. And then maybe they need to rethink their route. And then the helicopter had to see this coming. How long does it take to maneuver up and down or slow down? Well, there's another thing with the NVGs. Obviously, I'm not the expert at that. The subject matter expert on that, at least on this channel, is Spawn. And from what he described, it's like looking through a pair of binoculars. So think about how narrow, think about when you look through binoculars, how your vision is like, put your hands in front of your face. Like and think about what your vision looks like. You have no peripheral vision. So being able to see incoming, even though you'd think that they should be able to see it, and they confirmed that they could see it, the NVGs would be a problem. If looking in the wrong place and wearing NVGs. And I believe Captain Steve described it well when the preliminary report came out and he listened to the audio when this first happened. He believes that the helo, and I don't know if he still believes this, but based on preliminary information, he believed that when they said they saw the jet, they saw the jet behind 5342. Which I believe was another CRJ that belonged to Delta. Don't quote me on that. That's completely my memory from a couple months ago. But when he talked about it, he believed that they never even saw 5342. When they made when they said they had a visual, they saw the plane behind 5342, which I believe was 5110. I'd have to look at the preliminary report and figure out what plane that was to get the right number. But it just, yeah, the airspace alone should have been hyper aware of surroundings. And I just can't believe that you would allow night. It's one thing to say, okay, we're going to cross civilian airspace at night, but to do it in night vision goggles, there's just so many steps here where I believe the Army fucked it up. And I'm not going to sugarcoat it. One, we don't sugarcoat anything on this channel. And two, just because I'm a vet doesn't mean I'm going to cover for the military, because no, military fucked up. The military fucked up. That pilot fucked up. And I believe ATC allowing, I believe ATC screwed up as well. I'm just not sure the liability in that, because of the audio that they asked Pat 25 if they had visual. Pat 25 said yes. At the end of the day, ATC, when someone says, yeah, I saw it, or yeah, I see it, what is air traffic control going to do? Like, they say, yeah, we see it. We're going to go, under it. At the end of the day, the ATC can only do so much. They have a whole area just east of there with controlled military airspace at Pax Naval Air Station. Yeah, Pax River is for experimental stuff. I don't sugarcoat it. I don't eat M&Ms. It's the Army fucks up. Say it isn't so. Yeah, I don't know why they weren't at Pax River. Pax River is Maryland. I had a lot of people that I knew that went to Pax River after they left our squadron. They got stationed at Pax River. I never had the chance to get stationed anywhere else because I was a one and done. I was in my squadron a year longer than I should have been. But that was because they're not going to send you anywhere for like 6 months. No Reese's Pieces. I use, there's a company that, that Thrive Market sells, and they're like milk chocolate gems, but they're colored with more natural coloring than, there's no artificial dyes. So I don't eat Skittles. They hurt my jaw. And hey, Chris, how are you? I think they had to train in airspace like this. This was the least occupied at the time. I get that, but you can train using NVGs in a different airspace that is not civilians. Or you can train that route so you know the route to get out of DC without using NVGs. But they chose to do both. Busy airspace and NVGs, which I think was the problem. And it wasn't just a training exercise, because every mission that's not on a deployment is a training exercise. But the fact that she had to be that she was doing a recertification, she never should have. That route should never be used for a recertification. This is just my opinion based on years of dealing with aircraft and knowing that. I'm sorry, based on what I've seen in the last few days too, there is a huge difference that like veterans know things that civilians don't. No matter how much we try to educate people, there is just some things that vets know that civilians don't. And there's things that I can pick out in veterans. Like AT1 can say stuff and I can be like, oh yeah, you were really there. You really did it. I know just by the phrasing you're using that you really did. That is her medical kit. It has a little alarm on it that she loves. So it's like she flatlined. So it's I lost my train of thought. But like there are certain things that I know that I can never, no matter how many times I can say it, that certain people, and this is nothing personal, this is just what it is, that nobody will get unless they've been there. Like, there are things that Army people can say to me, and I can't relate to them because I hadn't been there. I never went boots on the ground, but at the same time, they can't tell you what it's like to live on a floating hunk of junk and being chased by random boats. So, yeah, when you have to emergency act POTUS, no one's getting notified in any way. Training for I get that, but I get that. However, you are putting civilian lives in danger by doing a training exercise. With civilian, I get it, but civilians did not sign up to be put in the middle of your training exercise. Like that, or find a different airspace, find a different route where you go farther behind the landing lane of DCA. Like, it's just, I'm sorry, Nina, we're still on day 1 because I'm stopping, but we will get to do day 2. When I do day 2, I will definitely put it in the the description that it is day 2. I am going to be doing all 3 days. It's just a matter of, like, I can't stream that much. I can't stream that much in days. So apologize, but my bosses are sitting today. Mr. Squid's on vacation all week, so, but I can't stream for 12 hours a day. My legs won't like that. Plus, I got mama life to do, and at the end of the day, mama life comes first. Mama duties come first. Streaming life comes second. So we'll get back into this. From that angle, he looks like if Bill Gates and Shizzy had his son. I mean, I see Phil Donahue. So we'll get back into this.
I'm in that area.
Okay. Last question for you, Mr. Cooper. Given that operational data from the UH-60 aircraft shows the deviations, once again, I'm referencing the 80 to 130 feet in exemplary aircraft, between the field elevation and indicated barometric altitude, does Sikorsky view this as an acceptable margin within the flight envelope?
The data that was taken during that evaluation, understand how the test was executed, but as the Army has mentioned, that there were a series of factors, including the fact that one of the aircraft had an altimeter tested post that evaluation that was outside of the maintenance limits, and its vibrator function was not functioning, which in the mil spec for the indicator creates a larger instrument error allowance.
Freezing.
I really cannot comment on that data because I do not believe it represents the aircraft's expected.
Thank you, sir. No more questions at this time.
Thank you, FAA.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Mr. Gant, I just want to clarify one thing with you. Does the FAA evaluate or certify military helicopters to operate in the National Airspace System?
Yeah, well, there's 2 methodologies to get a military surplus aircraft into the system under 2125. I mentioned earlier, like a UH-1L designed and built for use by the U.S. military with satisfactory operating experience. If surplused out and can be determined to be airworthy, it can be accepted without further showing. There are other military helicopters that were derived from a commercial aircraft before it was militarized and went into military service. And in that case, if that aircraft was surplused, you could bring it back into the FAA system, if you will, either under restricted category, or you could return it to its original civilian configuration and get it, I'll say, recertified to the appropriate part that it was certified to originally to get a standard C of A, airworthiness certificate for that aircraft. So there's 2 paths. Both can lead to just restricted category operations, but either way, you're going to be operating in the NAS with a restricted category airworthiness, so you're very limited on what you're allowed to do.
Mr. Brandom, how often are the static altimeter calibration tests performed on Army aircraft?
Yeah, so the maintenance, the maintenance that's required is the pitot static test procedure, and that's done every 12 months. which is, I believe the civil requirement is every 24 months.
And I'd like to follow up. Would an air traffic controller know that there was a discrepancy error in the altimetry system?
So I'm not being a controller. I'm not sure what information they have access to. I would say that certainly controllers, well, I'd be speculating other than to say that controllers must certainly be aware that there are error tolerances for barometric altimeters.
Based on what the transponder is sending out, would they see a difference from where the helicopter actually is?
Well, the encoding transponder, right, is sending pressure altitude and it's sending it in 100-foot increments. And again, it has the encoder could be, if the actual altitude is 110 feet, the encoder could send 200 feet, right? And so if the aircraft error is inside that band, then no, there wouldn't be any difference in what's being transmitted.
Okay, thank you. I yield back my time.
Thank you very much. We'll go with NACA, air traffic controllers.
Thank you, Chair. We have no questions for the witnesses at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. PSA Airlines.
Thank you. A couple operational questions here real quick. Ms. Lewis, before I want to go back to...
And PSA Airlines, one, I added the link for the first stream from yesterday into the description of the video. And second, PSA Airlines is the airline that was operating as American Airlines Express or American Connect or whatever they call their short distance. So they are operating as American Airlines or doing business as American Airlines.
Some of the questions Mr. Banning asked was, you say that flying at low altitudes, you use the radar altimeter below 200 feet. But when flying on the published route, you use the MSL. You use a barometric altimeter.
That's correct.
Is there any published standard in the manuals for which altimeter you should be using? Or is it just up to the pilots?
There's not, but to go back to what I previously stated, if I'm flying a published MSL route, I would have to be referencing my barometric altimeter to stay on that route.
Sure. So is it left up to the pilots to decide which instrument is primary?
If I'm flying a published MSL route, I would have to be referencing my barometric altimeter in order to maintain the published route altitude. That's not to say that I wouldn't also be cross-checking my radar altimeter. I'd be referencing multiple instruments as I was flying the route. I would be looking at both, but in order to stay on a route with a published MSL altitude, I would have to be in some part of my cross-check relying on my barometric altimeter.
Okay. So yeah, I understand. And that's basically, is there any briefing that goes in before the flight if you're doing a low altitude flying with your pilot or the pilots up there to discuss which instrument they'll be using or cross-referencing or which one's primary?
In my experience, the crew would discuss the altitude of different routes of flight prior to flight, but there would not be a specific discussion as to what instrument we would be looking at in the cockpit along the route of flight.
In your experience, which instrument is more accurate?
I can't speak to the accuracy. That's a difficult question to answer. As far as my experience, which instrument is more accurate? Both the radar altimeter and the barometric altimeter have tolerances, as Mr. Bradham has discussed, and as long as the aircraft is within those tolerances, I don't have any further reason to question as a pilot their accuracy.
Okay. Step back my mic here a little bit. This is for you again, Ms. Lewis. You stated that at 100-foot discrepancy between the altimeters being used by each pilot would be within specs. Would your level of concern be raised where you are operating with a 200-foot ceiling?
I didn't say within specification. I said it would be within standard as Army pilots are expected to hold their altitude plus or minus 100 feet. Mm-hmm. And as far as along the route of flight, no, that would not raise my level of concern if I was on a 200-foot MSL flight. That's just in my experience.
It was a bit slimy, but it was true. Like she didn't lie. She just basically said like that's not how we do it. Like this, she would talk about it, but like I told you once, you asked me the same question. I told you once, I would have to like I'm repeating myself like, and I can understand like when someone asks you a question and you give them an answer and they ask you the same question, just phrased it different. And she was like, I literally already told you, like you phrasing the question different and asking me again is not going to. So I understand it wasn't the answer that he was looking for. However, it wasn't the answer that he was looking for and wasn't the answer he wanted. But guess what? Yeah. Like, she's a pilot, so and she's obviously a female pilot. So I don't want to do the gender thing, but because at the end of the day, gender shouldn't matter. But this lately, and this is where I hate identity politics and why identity politics suck. Because 5 years ago, 10 years ago, I've known female pilots. I never looked at being a female myself. I never looked at a female pilot and was like, oh, you're a female. I should, watch, we should watch you a little closer. I never thought about that. Or did you get your job because you're a woman? I never thought about that. But nowadays, I look at people and I'm like, did you get your job based on your qualifications? Or did you get your job because of the way you look and what you got hanging between your legs? I never thought that was a thing I never thought that was a way I would live my life. But that is the downside, a large downside of identity politics, is now people who never would have thought like that are thinking like that. And I can't help it, because now I look at someone and I'm like, did you get your job because you're skilled, or did you get your job? And that is has a negative impact on the people who busted their ass to get where they are. So it's good. You play them at 1.35. I'm playing at 2. So watching them at 2.7, that one girl doesn't have much for facial expression, but one, she shows she really doesn't want to be there. Yeah, I don't know if anybody really wants to be here. And she's from Huntsville. She's stationed in Huntsville, so I don't know if she knows this pilot personally, but she might.
Okay. I yield back the rest of my time. I have no more questions.
Thank you. Sikorsky,
Sikorsky has no questions at this time.
U.S. Army.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just want to follow up on 2 questions. In reference to the earlier line of questioning about distance or height estimation while flying, I'd just like to ask both Ms. Lewis and Steve Bradham, based in that same vein, based on your confidence, what would you have a higher confidence level at low altitudes at nighttime using night vision goggles for height estimation or being unaided?
Night vision goggles, sir.
Yeah, sorry, it's been a long time since I wore night vision goggles, but I'd say night vision goggles.
And then just a follow-up question for Steve Brown. If we talked a lot about the inherent errors that are within acceptable range of the static system and the altimeters, those can compile and still be within standard. Can you describe what the kind of max extent of that acceptable deviation could be, and that could be presented in the cockpit?
Yes, sir. So as I said, the way we do, the way we qualify these systems is we look at each error individually. Instrument errors inside the altimeter, the static position error of the aircraft, based on the flight condition. We have standards for those individually. When we talk about a stack, they can combine, but I'm not aware of a definitive standard for the combination, because you have to deal with different flight conditions and whatnot. But there's a couple of different ways to look at that. One way is just to say the maximum instrument error you could see and fly the aircraft would be 70 feet on an altimeter, and then you would add position error to that, which by the spec would be 25 feet. So that's 95 feet of error. That doesn't include a mistake in the Colesman window or not having the right barometric pressure in the altimeter setting. So that's a kind of a rough approximation of a maximum error that you might see, 95, roughly 100 feet. I think if you did that same math on the civil side, you'd see their altimeter check was 75 feet, and 129, or sorry, FAR Part 29 gives you 30 feet of position error, so that'd be 105 feet.
Okay, thanks, Steve. Just to follow up with the FAA, and again, you probably can't answer this, but I'll put it on the record and we can come back to it in a later session. How does the FAA account for the known deviations within instrumentation errors that are acceptable?
Pretty much as already described. Again, the Airman's Information Manual, I think even in the IFR Flying Handbook, talks about setting your barometric altimeter on the ground and verifying with you're within 75 feet of field elevation, and then the periodic checks every 24 months to do the ground tests of the altimeter system.
Why every 24 months? That's my question.
Army has no more questions.
Why every 12 months?
Thank you very much. We're going to turn to the Board of Inquiry, and I'm going to go ahead and start. Ms. Lewis, I have a few questions. First of all, I just want to clarify. If you're on a published MSL route with maximum altitude of 200 feet, I'm going to be even more clear. You're on the Potomac River, maximum altitude 200 feet. Would you be referencing your barometric altimeter or your radio altimeter?
I would reference both. Yeah.
You would reference both. And is that by practice or by policy?
That would be by practice now.
Okay. Would it surprise you if we interviewed standardization pilots and other pilots at the 12th Battalion who said they relied on the barometric altimeter?
Would that surprise me? I would be surprised. I would think most pilots would be cross-checking both in those conditions, ma'am.
Wait. Well, did you hear what was just said? Would it surprise you? We're going back that ass up. Like, would it surprise you? Oh my God. It sounds that way, Roy, that they still have Alabama is where the Army had helicopter training. Considering most of these people are from Alabama. Well, Gail, listen to what the chairwoman says.
Barometric altimeter or your radio altimeter?
I would reference both, ma'am.
You would reference both. And is that by practice or by policy?
That would be by practice, ma'am.
Okay. Would it surprise you if we interviewed standardization pilots and other pilots at the 12th Battalion who said they relied on the barometric altimeter?
So she just said that when they interviewed people, would it surprise you if when we interviewed people, they said that they only go by barometric, which we heard is the least accurate at that altitude. And they're only looking at that one. So now I know that we really need to get into those interviews. Yeah. Gail, when they were doing interviews, apparently said they said they only look at the barometric altimeter. So I'll back it up 5 here.
Okay. Would it surprise you if we interviewed standardization pilots and other pilots at the 12th Battalion who said they relied on the barometric altimeter?
Would that surprise me? I would be surprised. I would think most pilots would be cross-checking both in those conditions, ma'am.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
You would think.
But is there a policy?
No, ma'am. There's no policy of
by
which
training and by
instrument
practice
specifically to look at.
Okay, great. So the formation flight of the 12th Battalion, that the test we did at Davison Airfield, true altitude is 45 feet. So Ms. Lewis, the barometric altimeter on the ground, no rotors turning for one of the helicopters showed 0 feet. Would that concern you at all? And why not?
No, it would not. The field elevation there being 45 feet, that would be within the 70.
Within the plus or minus 70 feet.
Yes.
Okay, and so the expectation once you take off, rotors are.
Hung Hero, thank you for the 10 Squid Pro memberships. I appreciate turning the chat green, and thank you for making sure that I don't work for free. Because these streams aren't the big like 300 people. They aren't the big like super chat getting streams, but they are the most interesting to me. But this line of questioning is fucking fascinating. Would it surprise you? I can't get that out of my head. I'm going to make that a short. I wrote that down to make that a short because I can't get that out of my head. Would it surprise you? So they were only looking. So there's a high probability that there's a high probability that they were only looking at the barometric altimeter. Which, do what? Do what? Like, do what? Like, is anybody else looking at that? Like, what the absolute fuck? Is anybody else just like floored by that comment, or is it just me?
Turning, you lift, you do a hover check, you take off. Are you thinking about that plus or minus 70 feet, or you've checked it at Davison Airfield and you say, okay, it's within tolerance, I can go. You're not doing math the entire time, correct?
I would not be doing math the entire time in my
Okay.
experience.
Great. So then you have, so for our test, rotors turning 100%, no collective input, again, 45 feet. All of a sudden, the barometric altimeter drops to negative 25 feet. Is that a concern, and why not?
Is that a concern, and why not? Basically, no, it's not a concern, and tell me why.
Ma'am, might I speak to that?
Yeah, sure.
Man, when you pick it up to hover, when you have rotors turning, what you're seeing is the rotor wake influence on the pitot tubes, and it's a standard effect. And I think pilots are aware of that effect, but they're not really looking at barometric altitude because we know below.
You're
40
looking at
knots.
radio altitude.
Well, yes, ma'am. Particularly at low speed, when
Right.
you pick up to a hover, you're not picking up to a hover based on barometric altitude.
Plus, it's within tolerance. Okay. So now you're doing a hover check, drops to negative 50 feet. Any concerns there?
No,
Okay. Why not?
because I would be looking at radar altitude at a hover. ma'am.
Okay, great. And now you are flying over terrain. Your barometric altimeter is negative 50 feet. Radio altimeter is 14 feet. You're at 60 feet. Do you have any concerns about the discrepancy? Off by 110 feet. You're probably not doing math though, right? You're probably looking at your radio altimeter right then.
Yes, that's correct. I would be looking at my radar altimeter at that point in time.
Okay, now you're over the Potomac River in this area of the crash. Let's say your barometric altimeter says 1,070 feet. Your radio altimeter says 1,200 feet. There's a difference of 130 feet. Do you question it? You're looking at both. Which one do you go with? You're on an MSL route, max 200 feet, altitude, or not, let's just say 2,000 feet.
They might have gotten it twice.
1,070 feet, 1,200 feet.
I would be referencing my barometric altimeter at that altitude.
Okay, and plus you said 100-foot difference, you said is not cause for concern.
Correct.
So you're looking at your barometric altimeter, which is 1,070 feet. What happens if you're on the route 4 near the area of this midair collision, max 200 feet, and you're looking at your barometric altimeter, which you said you would be looking at, and you know there is a 75 feet between the glide slope and the east bank of the Potomac River? Would that cause for concern if you had a 100-foot discrepancy between the two? And which one would you go with then?
If I knew those facts ahead of time going into that situation, I would be referencing the barometric altitude very heavily, but I would also still be doing that quick cross check of radio altitude to determine what altitude I was at that point.
And that's assuming you knew it.
Assuming I knew that ahead of time, yes.
Right. Okay. Do you think you should know those things?
Can you clarify exactly?
Do you think
which
you? Sorry. Do you think? Sorry about that. You think you should know where those if you're operating at such low altitude, do you think you should know when there's only 75 feet and your max altitude is 200 feet?
Yes, I would very much like to know that.
Okay. Thank you very much. And thank you for your responses. For the Army, have you looked anywhere else in the national airspace to see if this sort of oh, I'm over time. I'm so sorry. I will add 2 minutes to their time. We'll go on to Member Graham, add 2 minutes to theirs.
Not a problem. Okay. Ms. Lewis, you pretty much have said that when an Army pilot begins a hover of their aircraft, that they are looking at the radar altimeter. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Is there an altitude after the hover, as you depart the field or where you take off from, that you transition to barometric altimeter?
In my experience, it's not a set altitude, but as I'm climbing out of the airfield and once I'm no longer at a hover, generally I'll start referencing my barometric altimeter more heavily than I would have been before.
Okay. Is there a set altitude where a helicopter pilot in the Army should be transitioning to a radar altimeter?
There's no exact set altitude, but anytime I'm conducting, say, terrain flight 200 feet or below, I would generally be referencing my radar altimeter.
200 feet or below?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
And that's just in my experience.
Your experience? Okay. How do Army pilots ensure obstacle and terrain clearance while flying the Washington routes or at a low altitude?
In my experience, I've never personally flown the Washington helicopter routes.
Okay. Mr. Bradham, have you flown the routes?
And I know that they got this panel from Huntsville where they do training. However, don't you think if you're going to have somebody testify to what the routes would be or what the altimeter data, like, I'm not confused, but I have one of two issues. This is not an appropriate question for her. She is here to talk about altimeters. If you want to talk about routes, that's panel 2. Save your question for panel 2. And what I'm assuming would be a pilot that would be a pilot who has flown those routes before. She is not here to talk about the route. She is here to talk about the altimeters. If you wanted a pilot to talk about the routes, the altimeters with the routes, you should have gotten one of the 12th Battalion people to testify. Like, you shouldn't have. Yeah, I don't know. Like, maybe that's me. And hi, Rosalind Raiders. How are you guys doing? And Zach, I did work out today. It was a lot of snatches. See Discord for videos. Hoy. It, like, she's from Alabama. Yes, she's a Blackhawk pilot, but she's from Alabama. She's not going to be able to tell you the routes in DC. And if she had, she's going to tell you skill fade like me. And we all know routes change.
I have not, sir, but I know on subsequent panels you have an Army witness who's very experienced. He's a standardization instructor pilot for that
I'll
unit.
ask him those. But in your experience, Ms. Lewis, how do you keep obstacle clearance or terrain clearance while flying at low altitude? What altimeters are you using?
My radar altimeter.
Your radar altimeter. Okay. I assume you both have seen the Washington routes and their barometric routes. Have you seen other routes like this that are similar to Washington? Either one of you.
Sir, I'm trying to think. In my experience, I don't think I have seen I certainly haven't seen one that has such narrow vertical separation with an approach path the way that Route 4 and Runway 33 do. There are other helo routes through Class B airspace, but I'm not the.
Okay.
I'd be speculating, sir, if I went further than
I flew low altitude at fixed wing in the military, and I thought it was very unusual to see routes 200 feet or less, 300 feet or less that are MSL routes. And I'm looking to see, do you know of any other routes like that that are defined that way, that low to the ground?
Yeah, I do not, sir.
I thought these were.
This is weird. Like, it's just, there's no other place where this is happening. I just, yeah, and I noticed that too. I just, it's one of those weird things of like, I just can't do, like, just call her, I don't know, ma'am. She's a Blackhawk pilot. What, love her or hate her or think she's answering these questions appropriately, she has a level of knowledge that these men don't have. And you know me, I'm not the feminist type, but she has a level of knowledge that these mofos don't have. And I don't believe they're like, oh, I flew fixed wing low altitude. You don't fly at 200 feet in a fucking fixed wing aircraft. Like, let's be honest here. Just be honest. Like, her proper title is Chief Lewis. They're not going to call her that.
Very unusual myself. Let me switch here just a bit. Let's I think we were talking about the Mode C altimeter, what the transponder that sets the altitude, sends the message out on the altitude of the aircraft, and that is sent out, is my understanding, on the Lima model from the right side. Is that correct?
That's correct, sir.
Is that the default, or is that the only one that sends out the?
So that's the only one. So the right side altimeter is an encoding altimeter. The left side is not.
The left side is not. So this analog, there's only one.
Yes, sir.
Does the mic model have the ability to change which altimeter sends out?
Yes, it does, because it has a different design. Its integrated system has a redundancy capability where if one fails, there is an alternate data path from the other sensor.
Well, let me stay with you on that, Mr. Cooper. So the Lima model, if there's a large altitude split between barometric altimeters, there's going to be no indication to the crew that's alerting them that there's a large split in the altimeter. Is that correct? Other than the crew looking and noticing it and talking about it. Would that be correct?
Correct.
What about the mic model? Is there something in the air data computer that if there's enough altitude split between the two, that they're going to get an indication that something's not right?
The capability exists. It's in the multifunction display system and software. It identifies whether the selected altitude between the pilots is over a limit.
Okay.
Because the design has the capability to select the same sensor. So it's meant to not only catch sensors, but display issues. So it compares displayed altitude.
Most aircraft that I'm aware of, fixed wing and otherwise, that have air data computers have a system like that and have a maximum split where there's going to be an error that will notify the crew that something's off. Would that be a correct statement?
All I can talk to is there are other modern Sikorsky helicopters that also have that miscompare capability. In the analog era, Blackhawk, and even the original 76 when it was analog, that capability couldn't be implemented because the hardware means didn't support it.
Okay. This aircraft, I believe, was delivered in 2000. Am I correct on that?
2001.
2001. Are they still making the Lima model?
It is not in production now.
When was the last year Lima was made? The Lima was.
I don't have that date.
Okay. Does the Army have a plan for phasing out Lima models?
Yes, sir. We have a divestiture plan for the Limas that's currently ongoing. And so the plan is to replace the Limas with the mics because they are much more capable, as you alluded to.
What's the average life of a Lima model?
Since they came into service 1989 or so, right?
Yeah, the first Lima was delivered in October of 1989.
And do you know what the average life that the Army is getting out of the Lima?
I can provide that data. The specific data is post this investment. I don't have it in front of me now.
Okay, that'd be great. Thank you very much. I see my time's up.
Member Inman.
Thank you, Chair. And Mr. Rosengren, I'm going to start with you. And I will start with this. I thought I was going to be much more frustrated by the second panel, but I'm already that way. So I'm going to ask a very simple question. You just said you don't know the divestiture schedule for these models, correct?
No, sir. We know the divestiture schedule. What we don't have, I don't have the data in front of me, is the average life of the Limas. We can get that down to you by tail number.
But earlier you said your only plan right now, based on the work that these experts have done and the research, your plan is that you hope in 2 weeks is to update something in a manual for them to tell them about this discrepancy? That's the only update you plan?
No, sir. We've asked our airworthiness organization to give us a recommendation. Once we get that recommendation, if it is determined to be a risk, we hold a system safety working group, which has user representations, safety representation, PM representation, and that safety body, independent safety body, will make a recommendation to the PM and the program executive office, which will be.
Okay, hang on a second. What are you going to do in 2 weeks?
In 2 weeks, we'll get back the analysis from our airworthiness organization, the system requirements director.
So you don't even know if you're going to make any changes based upon the research we've already done?
So when we get the data back, then we will take that recommendation from our independent airworthiness organization, and then we will take appropriate steps.
Who's your independent?
Just so you're all aware, if you've ever dealt with any NTSB people or FAA people for that matter, when they're asking you questions, they aren't nice about it. Like they don't take any prisoners. They are not nice people. They are there to do a job, and they kind of have an attitude. And as you can see, even the chairwoman had an attitude when she was asking that pilot questions.
Airworthiness organization.
The System Requirements Directorate is the independent airworthiness organization that Mr. Bradham works for under the Aviation Missile Command, which is a separate command, a separate four-star command that ultimately reports up to different change.
So I guess the bigger question is, are you telling me right now then, from what you've seen already, these Lima models are safe to operate in the national airspace?
So based on the specifications of operating the national airspace, we do meet the specifications of operating the national airspace. So with
Okay,
that,
then I'll stop you then. What's the next question is, are the specifications wrong?
So that's something I cannot speak to because I'm not necessarily an expert of flying the national airspace. But when we receive the requirements, we make sure we comply with the requirements.
Okay, who can speak to that?
So the FAA.
Nina, oh, you resemble that remark. Well, you're there to do a job. You're not there to like make friends and be all, sugar and spice and everything. You're not there to sugarcoat stuff and candies and rainbows and sunshine. You're there to ask questions, especially when you only have a limited time, 5 minutes. Well, now 7 to ask questions. You kind of just straight to the point. And when you don't get the answer you want, you move on. It sounds kind of like a dick, but you kind of is, but you kind of got to be. Because if everybody's there to make friends, this is where facts over feelings really matters. These are not, these are not people to be like, oh, let's hold your hand and let's talk about it. No, I want answers and I want them yesterday.
It provides the requirements for flying in the national airspace.
And then the military describes, or basically sets the parameters for how to design the airplane or the helicopter?
So when for a military aircraft to fly in the national airspace, we have to go through the same qualifications as any commercial aircraft. So we don't own those requirements for flying in the national airspace. We only comply with them.
FAA, would you like to comment on that?
Well, again, the civil aircraft flying in the NAS, if they're under standard certificate of airworthiness, have met all the design standards at the time that they were certified.
Okay. So I just want to clarify something else because I think it's important because there's a lot of important people that worked on these airplanes. The altimeter differences that they've been discussing recently are not the effect of a maintenance issue, but it's a design issue.
It's the fact that you're trusting a barometric pressure altimeter with rotor wash, low altitude, various terrain changes, water of the river, the depth of the river, the fact that it's freshwater, the fact that it's not very wide, so you're going from land to water, land to water. You have ceilings, you're wearing NV. There's a whole bunch of shit that went into this. And these questions that are being asked are very narrow. Like, I understand they kind of have to be, but at the same time, it's like they're asking specific questions on a non-specific issue.
Sir, I think what the discrepancies that have been seen can be explained by a stack of the different errors between instrument and static position error. And for example, the temperature effects on the in the 15th of May for that particular set of flights. So I think you can explain that deviation as being within the tolerance band for those different errors.
How much tolerance should we have for aviation safety whenever civilian lives are at risk?
Yes, sir. Safety is critically
No, I
important.
ask you, how much tolerance for safety should there be when civilian lives are at risk?
Sir, in terms of airspace separation, for how much separation should there be between aircraft that are using barometric altimeters?
Now, you just told me, I believe, all of this equipment in this manufacturing process is within the tolerances for safety.
The tolerances should be smaller, or these aircraft should no longer be flown. Simple solution.
How much is that tolerance? I think it should be zero.
Sir, I think you might have questioning. I had those similar thoughts when I saw some of the data that your team put up with. And then when Mr. Bradham walked me through, here's the physical limitations. There's nothing anyone can do when we have these machines that provide this data. And so we have to understand there are physical limitations to that, which is offhand plus or minus 100 feet. So from my perspective, when I was flying out here, going to fly in on the exact flight that had the accident. And so my condolences to the families. I can't imagine what you're going through.
Which is where pilot knowledge, pilot experience, and looking at more than one fucking instrument comes into play.
My thoughts and prayers are with you. But knowing that there's plus or minus 100 feet, any qualified Army pilot or any civil pilot will go, the fact that we have less than 500-foot separation is a concern for me personally.
Okay, so I'll ask you this question. There was a quote someone said, modernization decisions made this decade will affect the next generation of Army aviators. Do you remember that one?
Yes, sir, I wrote that article.
And that article described how we need to update and outfit with additional technologies?
Yes, sir. Blackhawks are going to fly for another 50 years. And so I think it's very, very pertinent and very vital to upgrade the Blackhawk fleet today so that we can have 60 mics and even more capable aircraft in the future.
So should the Limas be flying today?
If I was king for a day, I would take all the Limas out of the fleet today and replace them with mics and make them better so that our soldiers have the most effective
Well, you're not the
fighting
king.
aircraft. No, sir, I'm not.
But what you want to do and what you have to do or what you can do are like there's what we want to do isn't always what, like, I would love to be able to do a whole bunch of shit that I can't do based on money, based on like time, based on experience. Like, there's a whole bunch of shit that the world would like to do that it can't. We have limitations. And for you to, for this guy who's asking the questions to be like, looking at this guy like, well, you wrote this article. Yeah, but there's the difference between the perfect world we live in, or the perfect world, the utopia we want to live in our heads, and the reality of life. But I still will never be okay with an Army helicopter flying through a civilian landing, like, with that low of tolerances and that distance of separation, less than 500 feet separation. Will, like, no, like, I can't, that I will never be comfortable with that ever. No level of, well, they have to train, they can change the route. They can fly farther behind. They can fly on the other side of the airport. There's more than one route out of DC, especially when the airspace is yours. This I will never be okay with on any level.
I'll pass to the next round, Chair.
Thank you, Member Inman. Great questions. Are you a party? Is the Army a party to this investigation?
Yes, ma'am.
So the reason why we have parties to investigations, the entire reason, is so that you can get data and get access to what we're finding in real time so you can make safety change immediately and not wait till the end of our investigation to do that safety change. When did the formation flight occur?
May 15th.
May 15th. So I'm a little bit confused. You have this formation flight, you know the discrepancies. What is the Army doing with the Limas, either at the battalion or the fleet, to address this? Do you plan, did you test the other
Not a
helicopters, or the other
motherfucking
Limas
thing.
at the battalion?
So when
Yes or no? Did you test the other Limas at the at the 12th Battalion to look at whether there were any discrepancies outside of what you would anticipate?
I'd have to defer the 12th Aviation Brigade for their maintenance schedule.
Okay, how about Army-wide?
So when we discovered the discrepancies on May 15th with some of the altitude, we queried our Sikorsky friends and got the data. We verified that the data wasn't
Wait. When was that data obtained by you?
the Sikorsky data.
Mm.
So it was obtained in 1983. We have a model
No,
based.
that you just asked for.
That was the 50-foot ESSS error, or external source support error.
Maybe I can speak
Thank
to that.
you.
So it came out of the factual report that came from one of the exhibits here that Sikorsky had provided input to, and we then went through the history of that, and we looked at a number of potential contributors. We wanted to make sure that that error existed in 1983. We confirmed that. We wanted to make sure that that error still exists, because there have been some changes to the aircraft over time. Went back through our airspeed calibration records, through some other, investigated some other questions to make sure that in fact that error exists. We have, right before this hearing, have gone through all our models and verified that we believe that that error exists.
Which error specifically?
And I'm speaking to the position error for the external storage support system with one tank on each side. So that position error of about 40 feet at 80 knots and about 50 feet at 100 knots.
Okay, so you mentioned, so you do not actually plan to test the other Limas to see if there are any unanticipated discrepancies in barometric altimeters.
So based on the flight test records we have today, we don't see a need to test the Limas because the configurations are standard across the fleet.
Do you have, is there other airspace, anywhere in the national airspace where this may be similar? Have you checked?
Man, we did do a search to look to see if there had been any safety incidents on the Blackhawk related to the pitot-static system. We did not find any.
Did you work with FAA to look at the glide slope for any landing aircraft to make sure at any runway at other airports across the nation where you might have this same issue?
You won't have this.
Okay. So policy-wise,
You don't have this same issue at any other fucking airport in any other state in this country. This is a uniquely DC issue. Like, I just, FAA needs to set a separation distance between aircraft tied to the least accurate. Yeah, and this is the thing that they were gonna be close, regardless of whether they were gonna be within 500 feet, regardless of whether they were staying on at the right altitude or not. And that's the problem. Well, that's what I see as the problem. Sorry, I've been trying to sneeze for like a half an hour. What I see as the problem is that these planes were going to be close, regardless of but they're going to be close regardless. And that's the problem. And that's what I feel is the problem. And that people can feel free to disagree with me, but like putting civilians in harm's way over a military training exercise is still to me something that I will never get over. And the Army is to blame for this. And the Army is 100% to blame for this. And it's just a matter of why. Is it the altimeters that was the problem? Or is it just a pilot not listening? Where's the fact that they were both wearing NVGs when they shouldn't have? But like the Army is to blame. It's just why are they to blame is the question that the government has overspent for so long that neither side is willing to make the necessary painful decisions to rein in spending. Yeah, and that's my big problem. And when they are, all of a sudden people are evil and this and that and this doesn't really exist and this and I'm in the process of recording videos on all the documents in the Medicare and Medicaid fraud cases across the country. I'm not going to do a live stream and read them. I'm going to read and talk about them one by one in separate videos. Time with Baby Squid's birthday. It was like a birthday month. And I, now that tomorrow is a new month, Mr. Squid goes back to work next week. Schedule will be sort of back to a normal thing. We now have this and all this docket to go through, recording video. I'm going to be super busy, and I just have to find the time. Like, there's not enough time in the day to do everything that I want to do. So I still have videos from like months ago that I want to record, and I just can't. So I need to pick my battles. So I also don't like how the tolerances keep getting split up. Oh, it's only 50 for this and 25 for this and this and so on. How many things are there in the total stack that they've not even seen? Yeah. If the Army planned it, then it's FUBAR. I don't think the Army planned it. I just think the Army, the 12th Battalion fucked up. And I think that particular pilot and the instructor pilot screwed up because they, in my opinion, they both shouldn't have been wearing NVGs. But that's a story for another day. Yeah. I don't think the civilian airport airport should be that located close to DC. There's a lot of things that are, there's a lot of things that we cannot change, and we just have to deal with what they are. We just have to deal with where they are and what they are. But I don't ever think that a Army training or even a Navy or any sort of training exercise should put civilians in harm's way at all. And if I were the Airline Pilots Association, that's what I would be discussing when it comes to the routes around DC. Why are we letting military aircraft cross our landing paths? That's a military exercise, and you're putting civilian lives in harm's way. And I truly believe that the CRJ didn't even see the helo, because the helo is down here. They're coming this way. I truly believe that they didn't even because their scope of view is so narrow as well. I mean, yeah, they have lateral view, but horizontal, especially in the dark, when you're focused on the runway in front of you, think about that. And this is a CRJ 200. That was a CRJ 700. So there are some spec differences, but it is what it is, So we can get back into this. I think I'm going to wrap up as soon as the next person that is answers questions, then I'm going to call it a night because we're 3 hours into this. Angel. Hi, beautiful. Can you get that off your head, please? Yes. Thank you.
What? You said you're putting something in a flight manual?
So there's several courses of action that could happen based on the recommendation from our airworthiness organization. We could update the flight manual to include the air table, the air altitude correction table. We could put out.
Okay, I'm running out of time. I want you to walk us through when that started, what each of the steps are to get to the end of that, to where you have a policy and a manual, or whatever the recommendations are in the airworthiness group. What are each of the steps, and when will that occur? How many steps? I mean, not just how many. Walk us through that process.
Ma'am, so the moment was identified, the first step was making sure that in fact that error did exist, and that was going through all of our models. That's complete. We've looked at a number of things to try to make sure that that error hasn't been changed over time, and we verified that. So that analysis is complete. Our aeromechanics group inside our airworthiness organization has completed analysis. They should be providing the recommendation back over to the program office to provide our recommendation for what should be added to an operator's manual, or how the pilot should be made aware of that that altimeter correction for the ESSS configuration, and then that'll go into the PM office for decision.
Then there'll be a system safety working group that'll determine if there needs to be a aviation safety action message for immediate notification, or if it will go into a 2028 process to update the technical publications, or if it'll go in an airworthiness release. So that'd be the third and fourth final step.
How long will that take?
once we get the memo back, so the recommendation, we can convene within a week, and then following the SysWig, we can determine if it's an aviation safety action message, and that's coordinated through our aviation missile command. That can go happen within days, and if it's updated into a manual, we first put it in the AWR. Again, that's within days to weeks. If it goes into the manual, the 2028 process is a little bit longer, but we would put it in the AWR first, so it's notified, and then the manual change will come out following that.
Okay. I need, how long do you believe this entire process will be?
So from today, being, let's say July, end of July, so by the end of August, the SysWig should have met, and so early September, we should have the direction that'll come out of the System Safety Working Group, and then that'll determine the ASAM, the AWR, and or the manual path.
Okay.
So September 15th ballpark.
And that's just the recommendations.
No, that's for the final action.
That is for the final action.
With the caveat that if it is determined to update the manual, that would take a longer process. The AWR would go out in lieu in the interim until the operator's manual is updated.
Thank you.
I don't think, okay, as much as the NTSB, no offense to the NTSB people, but the Army, I don't think that she understands, the NTSB lady understands how long shit takes in the military to change. Like, it's not just regular government, it's extra slow government. You have to go through extra layers of red tape because they not actually have to comply with your regulations in the NTSB, but they also have to comply with military regulations and mil specs and this and that and this and that. Blah. So I don't think that she quite understands. Like, I like her overall. I like her brashness. I like her straight to the freaking point. However, I don't think you can tell that she's never served because she's asking these Army guys questions and they're answering it like shit takes forever. It's not my fault. Like, this is just how the military works. I just, and hey, expert, how are you? Like, you can tell that she's never been in the military. It's like, it's one of those things that, like, tell me you've never been in without telling me right there.
Questions on the flight data recorder. As part of our investigation at this point, radio keying was supposed to be recorded per the recorder documentation, but that data was not present. Do we know why?
So we sent a team down to a unit in Alabama and verified that data is not being downloaded. We're currently investigating that, and we don't know why that data is currently not being downloaded or not being input into the system. So it's an open issue that we're investigating.
Okay, and I assume our investigative team's tied in with that as when you guys know something?
Yes, sir. We would let them know.
Okay. Yeah, for you, Mr. Rosengren, you indicated the accuracy of the flight data recorders are checked whenever there's a software upgrade. How often are there software upgrades?
So for this particular system, there was a substantial software update in 2011, and then there was minor updates in 2013, 2015, and 2017, and we're currently undergoing an effort to make another software upgrade right now.
Okay, and you did mention something about there was some thought behind doing a FOPA program with the flight data recorders. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. We had an aviation data exploitation capability program back in the mid 2010s. That didn't come to fruition.
Okay. Do we know why it didn't?
I can't speak to the decision of the acquisition professionals, but I believe it just didn't make it past the certain checkpoints during acquisition programs.
Okay, thank you for that. That's all the questions I have for this panel. I want to thank the witnesses.
Member Inman.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Rosenberg, I'm going to go back one more time. You're saying middle of September, you're going to inform or hope to inform Army aviators of what?
If there's a change for the altitude with external storage support system on the aircraft, if there's a recommended delta altitude discrepancy.
Yeah, see, I think, Chair, and I can just, let me clarify one thing too, and I want to point this out. The parties that have been involved with us from the Army have been very helpful and I think worked with us very well. I think that was discussed earlier. So we appreciate this. This is the first time we're actually interacting with you all as witnesses, which I think is probably some of our frustration of what we're hearing in this testimony. And the reason I bring it up is in a personal sense, I used to live at 400 Army Navy Drive when this crash occurred. I looked out over the Pentagon, DCA. Chair and I stood on runway 33 the night that this accident happened. I moved to McLean specifically so I wouldn't have to face that. My wife wouldn't have to see me wake up in the middle of the night. Whenever I moved to McLean, though, I found out after being there the last 2 weeks.
Poor you. Don't give a damn. Get on with it. I mean, no offense, but I understand that the NTSB are people too. But like, you're telling people who lost, like you're saying this in front of the family members, in front of the Pilots Association, in front of PSA Airlines who lost their pilots, in front of the families of children who lost their lives. I don't give two flying fucks about an NTSB having to move because he was on the runway that night. Not my fucking problem. Not Scott Rosengren's problem. Not appropriate to be talking about that during this hearing. Move the hell on.
I'm on one of your flight paths over 495. Over the last weekend, 5 of those Limas flew behind my house. And you're telling me it's going to be 2 months before you tell them that there's a discrepancy in their altitude? Could you hurry it up?
Yes, we would do, that's a worst case scenario. We'll do everything to exceed that time frame.
How about telling them now?
We are in public testimony, and so we have
don't know.
we have put it out there in public testimony.
Once again, tell me you were never in the military without telling me, and tell me you're a pussy without telling me.
I hope every Army aviator is not having to watch the NTSB.gov live stream to figure out that there's a discrepancy in their altitudes of the planes that are flying around us. Sorry for my frustration. For Sikorsky, how many of these Lima models are still in operation around the world?
Sorry, I don't have that number. I'd have to, I cannot answer the Army numbers, and we'd have to go back to determine our international operators.
Could you please?
Okay.
How many were manufactured with this variant, I guess, is a good question. How many are still operating with a certificate?
Yeah, we'll find out. We can get the answer to both.
Okay. Has Sikorsky received any reports of conflicting altitude readings elsewhere outside of the military?
No, the answer is no. I requested information from our database and went through it, and I did not see any reports as such.
How much does a Lima model, how much did you sell a Lima model for?
I'm sorry, I'm engineering. I don't know the cost data.
Okay, can someone from the Army say how much you paid for a Lima model?
They don't know either.
I don't have that data either,
They're
but we're
not
happy
in
to
that
provide that for you.
position.
That and how much the Mike model cost?
Yes, sir.
Once again, dude, asking questions that aren't fucking appropriate. Like these are about altimeter. These people are the experts in altimeter data. Like these are engineers. These are the pilots. These are the FAA people. This is the Sikorsky engineer. Like these are not people who fucking acquire helicopters for the U.S. Army. Like you're wasting your damn time based on your frustration and your inability to handle your emotions. That person should be like not on a panel anymore. Like that person should have excused themselves based on the fact that they can't remain neutral and they're emotional. Like this, I can get emotional here because this is my stream. I can do whatever the hell I want on my stream. Like I to a limit, you know, to what YouTube says is appropriate. But like I would not be acting and talking like this if I was there. But I'm sorry, I don't care. We're here to find out answers about what happened to these people, like why this happened, how we can fix it and make it better for next time. I don't care that an NTSB employee has PTSD and had to move and is worried about the Limas that fly behind his house. Not appropriate. Yeah, not appropriate. Like I just no. Like dude, ask questions that are like one, ask questions, and two, ask questions that are appropriate to these people, not these individuals' knowledge base. They're not here to ask questions about how many you have flying. You can Google that. I'm pretty sure I can Google how many freaking Blackhawk helicopters are in service around the world and find an answer. Might not be the most accurate answer, but it would shut this dude up. Like, no, you I'm sure you can put a camera on them, kind of like not a GoPro, but something kind of like a GoPro, but just in general, no, NVGs don't have I mean, obviously it's a TV trope, but I'm sure they could. I'm sure it's possible, but it's like this dude got under my skin. Like this dude really got under my skin.
So noted that I believe it's in the chairman's or the group chairman's report, and I'm going to just cite it a little bit. If I can pull it up here.
Remember how I said that this is about where facts matter and emotions don't? Well, he's getting over emotional. Over his own personal feelings and not anything that
So this altimeter was actually returned for service and reconfigured. Are you aware of that? The right altimeter?
I was not aware of that, sir.
Okay, it's in the group chairman's report for helicopters. Have you read the group chairman's report for helicopters?
Yes, sir. I've read all the exhibits for this hearing.
Well, I'd refer you to page 39 and 40. So if you don't know that that was done, I think it would be helpful to read it.
Cool.
Both the
This
PICs,
dude has a
the altimeter had been overhauled and recertified in 2018. Have you went back and looked at other recertifications and overhauls of altimeters to see if they're still within specs?
We have not, sir. And the device is an on-condition item, so it's only overhauled once it doesn't get pulled and overhauled in a regular interval. It only comes out when it no longer passes its checks.
Tell me you've never been military aviation and you've never been a maintainer without telling me. He has no idea what the fuck he's talking about, and he's trying to ask questions as if he does. He's trying to get a gotcha moment when he has no idea what he's talking about. Jeffrey, not normally, but can be modified to do so. Recording would eliminate plausible deniability. AT1, have you ever had somebody take something out of an aircraft and send it to you just for testing for no reason? For an interval? Did y'all ever do that back in the day? Because we didn't have anything that was pulled out just for the sake of pulling it out and testing it. Like, the only time we took out equipment is when there was a discrepancy, or sometimes what we thought was the problem wasn't actually the problem. But joys of troubleshooting a radar system like ours. But it's like, tell me you've never been a naval or a military aviation maintenance without telling me. Like, maybe it's just me being salty. Maybe it's just me being, then this dude has already annoyed me. But like, he's asking questions, trying to catch them in a gotcha moment. And it's like, he's showing more and more with the more he asks questions that, in my view, he has no idea what he's talking about. And even this guy right here is kind of like,
question before my time runs out. So the Army determines the mil spec for not only where the pitted tube is. Now, I apologize if I'm mispronouncing it, the pitted tube, where it goes, but it specifies specifically the altimeter that must be used with it. Is that correct?
The original requirement specified.
They've literally said pedo tube like 500 times during this so far in the last 3.5 hours, and he still can't fucking pronounce it right. Like I said, why is he working for the NTSB? I have no idea. Maybe this job ain't for you, bro.
The altimeter to use and actually provide it as government furnished property, but it did not specify where the probes would go.
So was that Horsky's decision of where the probe would go?
Yes.
That was before my time, but I would believe so, yes.
And you earlier said that was technology, I guess, in the 70s at the time that it was decided, right? Before you had flow test and other type of testing?
That is correct.
Have you not reevaluated that test to determine if a design change should occur now that you have new methods?
No. Again, there's been no further requirements for any different.
No, I'm not asking about a requirement. The Sikorsky now has additional ways to test.
If it ain't broke, don't fix it. You work for the damn government, and you haven't figured out yet that we're not a proactive society. We are a reactive society. We don't fix stuff because there's a better way of doing it. We don't fix it until it fucking doesn't work anymore. We don't fix things until they're broken. We don't fix things until something happens. We don't fix things out of the goodness of our heart and just because we know there's a better way to do it. That's not how our society works. That's not how our government works. And if you think government agencies like NTSB, FBI, FAA, TSA, all of the lettered agencies, you think they move slow? Try USN, USA, USMC. They move even slower. So shit gets done even slower.
You went back and looked at its aircraft and said, we know better things. We should suggest a change in where these pitted tubes go.
No.
Any reason why?
If it ain't broke,
As I
don't
stated
fix it.
before, when you consider there's limited real estate on that aircraft where these could be put and other operational considerations. So again, austere landing conditions, worrying about damage to their probes, debris impacting the pitot or static.
Those probes aren't cheap. Those probes aren't cheap. Those probes weren't cheap back in 2005 to 2009. Those probes are sure as shit not cheap now. So if you put them in a location like where they're located probably might not be the best location for accuracy. But like he said, you have to take into account if you put them where they're right next to the door, you're going to have maintenance people, you're going to have aviators, you're going to have all these people possibly hitting the you're going to have, if you put it in front of the door, you have a door gunner. If they're shooting, you're going to they're going to shoot the tube. And then you screw all barometric altitude because you're not going to have a fucking pitot tube. Like, you can't there is ideal and then there is practical, and you have to find a balance between the two. And NTSB wants ideal, and we don't live in an ideal society. It's not a fucking utopia. And I don't understand why people in this world think that we should live in a utopia. It's like, that's not the way shit works. And yes, does it suck? Of course. But it's just the way the world works. And if you want to make it through without losing your goddamn mind, you got to figure out a way to get through it without trying to be in a utopia. You have to find a way to balance the fact that this is how it should be and this is how it is. Yeah, and they get really, really hot. Ask me how I know. I'm yeah, I was an E3 once. And I had somebody else go, oh, go and touch that when the aircraft got back. And it's like, no. One, that's not my job. And two, no. They get hot. They get hot. This dude, but this Phil Donahue right here is like, what the fuck do you want me to say? Like, this is not how shit works. I've told you this. You heard me say it. And this is where it's like he's wasting his time because he's asking questions that have already been answered. Why did you put it there? Is there a better place to put it? You have to take into all things considered. It's the best place for it to function while still being safe.
Ports. The other devices on the aircraft, which would limit separate static ports like what was shown in the presentation. So again, limited areas and no identified need for different performance.
We'll keep going. All right. While I am asking this question, can Mr. Fuchs, can you pull up, I think we sent it to you, 7 Hilo H Appendix A, Table A1. Before I ask that question, though, for the transponder, I just want to go back to the, well, actually, before I go to the transponder, you said, Mr. Rosengren, you had said possibly a safety alert in September or some sort of alert, correct?
Yes, ma'am. We could send out an aviation safety action message that would go out to the fleet.
Okay. And then when is the first chance for it to go in the manual?
So the manual goes through a 2028 process. So that would begin in lieu of going into the manual.
I actually think this is where we are going to cut it short or cut it off. Baby Squid's going to be going to bed soon. It's 3 hours and 20 minutes into this stream. I think that is all that we need to do for tonight. We've made it 3.5 hours into day one. We will pick it up probably tomorrow for more, and probably Saturday. I'll probably do a little bit each day just to get through it because like I said, I want to do it. I want to get through the entire thing, but I also don't. I'm not here. This is not college. I'm not here to be your professor and lecture you. And also, when it gets to be all this technical stuff, it is pretty damn hard to focus after a while. With the questioning, some of it's been technical and some of it hasn't, so it's been easier than yesterday. But I think the other panels will also go quicker in the sense of not as technical, especially routes around DCA. You won't get as much technical ability on like a pitot tube of what a pitot tube does and barometric pressure and all the sciencey stuff that we love, but it's just a lot. However, it is a Hales update day, so if there's any documents, I will be updating. I wanted to read the updated lawsuit. However, we all know, one, Megan and Tug read it. Secondly, it's the same lawsuit. It's just added Megan and Tug. Like it, Like, there's not a lot to it. You know what I mean? But I will be checking the dockets for all things updates. But until then, I will see you guys tomorrow. I appreciate all of you hanging out with me. I know a lot of you have been in and out, in and out. I appreciate all the raiders that stuck around. I know that coming in the middle is also kind of confusing if you haven't been following with us for the last 2 days. But anyway, y'all have a great night. I have you set up to redirect to Vice Baby. If he's still live, I hope he's still live. Let me check just to make sure. I had him set up to redirect over there a little while ago, but if he's not live anymore, then you know. Yep, Vice Baby. Tell him that I said he's done. Oh no, it says he's still live, but it says he's still live. What's up? So, Digger, I'll have to. She doesn't come up on my stuff, so let me see if I can. Digger, yeah, she doesn't come up on my stuff on my redirect. Oh, I can't redirect. Well, no, I can. There we go. She does. Chatting with chat. Go tell her I said hi. Make sure you hit that like button. Show her some love. And I will see you guys tomorrow. Bye.